This week's episode is sponsored by Change. Change is the #1 mentoring program that teaches you e-commerce from scratch. Change has a real community with real results. I have attended many of his events and retreats across the world and got to meet members and the amazing community of like-minded people. Ryan works with a lot of big names in the business world, helping them build online businesses and e-commerce. Change offers personal one-on-one support, no experience needed, but like anything, this takes time and is not a get-rich-quick scheme. Go follow Ryan on Instagram at RyanJB, and he will guide you through the steps to help you get started and build a successful online business. You can now follow me on all my social media platforms to find out who my latest guest will be. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you're notified for when my next podcast goes live. And boom, we're on. And today's guest, we've got Sulaiman Ahmed. Sulaiman, how are we?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Really good, thank you. First and foremost, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me.
You do journalism, you're popular on social media, debating and having your say around the world. And I think it's important to have people from all walks of life. I know people might think I'm certain corner or whatever, a certain side, a certain wing. I don't genuinely give a fuck. I'm all about down the middle. Sometimes you can gravitate towards certain sides because of social media.
Yeah.
But right now I'm in a position that I need to question everything again, because what I see is not right, and it's the old-fashioned saying, which I'll keep repeating, is divide and conquer. I think the world we're living in now is we're pointing fingers and everything's point scoring. Oh, he's white, look, why are you not exposing that? Oh, he's black, or he's Muslim, or he's Christian. Instead of everybody working together to destroy the evil, we're all fighting against each other, and that's what the people in power want. That's the way I see it, and I could be wrong, but it's good to have a different perception of life. You're a Muslim man.
So first of all, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, before our conversation, before the show, I did actually think you were like far right. And even if you were, like, I've got no issue with it. I've got many friends in the United States of America who I would probably consider far right. But I'd say the issue we have in the UK is many people from that contingent are too afraid, and I think it's done intentionally, to actually have a conversation publicly. And I believe the reason is because their ideas aren't strong enough. And so you'll have people like whoever, like Tommy Robinson, various others, who will like run away from a conversation with us, run away from a debate. As an example, he accepted a debate with me, but then was too afraid to like actually stand by what he says. And I think that's what the issue is. Like, people who don't have strong ideas are not willing to have conversation. Whereas me, I'm willing to have a conversation with anyone, someone from the far left who I disagree with, someone who from the far right who I disagree with, because I think in the avenue of ideas, that's the best way to understand whose positions are correct and whose positions are strong. And I agree with you. I think the people in charge are intentionally causing destruction and harm between various groups because they stay at the top, and then there's no burden in terms of ensuring that, you know, things, if the poor people, working class people fight amongst themselves, nobody's looking at those in power.
Yeah, but there's no compromising anymore. There's no common sense.
Yeah.
So instead of everybody pointing fingers, we're blaming everything. And like we touch on grooming gangs, which needs to be exposed. But we've then got to look at the Catholic Church with priests and the white paedophile rings and Christians and all the covers up with that. So instead of someone promoting one side, we need to be promoting all sides, meaning everybody should be working together to expose the evil. That's why I ain't on a fucking side. I don't care who you are. I've got friends on right, I've got friends on left, I've got Muslim friends, Christian friends, I've got friends all walks of life. How they treat me is how I will treat them, and that's the way it should be. I don't know extremists. I don't know. There's extremists in all walks of life, but we're living in a society where it's all about views, it's all about attention, so people are jumping on the bandwagon of what's trendy. They've done it with Ukraine, they're doing it with Palestine and Israel and Russia. People don't know what they're talking about. They're seeing a couple of videos online and all of a sudden they're geniuses in what they think they are, but it's not the way, because even I've got lack of knowledge on all these things. I can only see online and then get my assumption from it, but it's not accurate either, because the media and social media doesn't portray the truth.
Yeah, true.
You know?
Because it's based on an algorithm, and it's based on whoever's in power, what they want to propagate. Now, in terms of grooming gangs, obviously we'll come to that issue. But in reality, the question mark becomes, why has that become a big issue right now? So my position, and a lot of people, maybe a lot of your fans will be upset with what I'm saying. But if you understand the nuance of what I'm saying, you'll understand that there's actually like depth behind my position. So grooming gangs, of course, it's a major issue, right? Not just grooming gangs. Abuse, child abuse, all of these things are a huge problem, right? Now, for this first point, before we get into that issue, why is it that we're speaking about it now? Well, in my view, this is intentionally being propagated by the Zionist-controlled media. And they don't just control the media, the NGO groups, and various other things. So, like, obviously, let's just take Tommy Robinson example. Tommy Robinson will quite accurately, and I know he said it on your show, that I don't get paid by Israel. It's like getting paid by YouTube. But it's a bit different because Israel doesn't pay people directly. So, for example, TPUSA, which is Charlie Kirk's organization, it wasn't the Israeli government sending money to TPUSA. It was rich Jewish Zionist billionaires who were funding TPUSA, or even evangelical billionaires. And what they would do is they would then want that organization to propagate those ideas. So as an example, Robert Shillman is somebody who 48 hours before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, pulled his funding because he wasn't happy with the direction that Charlie Kirk was taking. He was platforming people like Tucker Carlson, which made him unhappy. But who is Robert Shillman? So this is a guy who was funding TPUSA, millions of dollars. He then pulls the funding because he's not happy with the direction in terms of Charlie Kirk's position, in terms of platforming people like Tucker Carlson, who's spoken out against the state of Israel. Who is Robert Shillman? Robert Shillman is the same person who funded Tommy Robinson. Robert Shillman is the same person who funded Rebel Media. And so Robert Shillman funds anti-Islam propaganda, and he also funds the state of Israel, or anything that benefits the state of Israel. But not just him as well. David Horowitz is another example. David Horowitz, who was a left-wing Marxist, but a Jewish Zionist, who then became right-wing, he again funds the David Horowitz Freedom Center. What is that? That funds pro-Israel positions. He also funds the IDF, but he also funds anti-Islam propaganda. Also, on top of that as well, you've got Rob, and then you got David Ellison. David Ellison's taken over TikTok. But if you remember, and this is a left-wing Jewish Zionist who said, we have a TikTok problem. We have a generational problem because there's a big gap between the generations. The generations have woke up to the Zionist control of the media, the Zionist control of our government, the Zionist control of the United States government. And he said, we've got a generational problem because even in the United States of America, I'm sorry, I talk a lot about US because most of my audience is American. I'm like the Asian version of Pace Morgan. But so he's about Larry Ellison. So he took over TikTok. Why did he? Because Jonathan Greenblatt, who is a left-wing Jewish Zionist, said, we have a generational problem. The youth is not for Israel, is not for Zionism. Democrats completely, which is the left wing. And now the data shows, according to a recent YouGov poll, the vast majority of Republicans under 30 are against Israel. And so they said that we got a TikTok problem. Then Jonathan Greenblatt, I remember he's a left-wing Jewish Zionist, and he said, we are fighting the battle in the field, but we also need to fight the battle in terms of from the informational perspective. And then what happened? Larry Ellison comes along and says, I'll buy TikTok. And so Larry Ellison is somebody who again funds the IDF. He also funds, and he also bought TikTok. Now, why I mention all these three people is they're all involved in the buying of TikTok. They're all in the buying CBS News. They're about to buy CNN, so they're controlling the media. And then why I mention all these people is these people in different levels are involved in the hatred that is spewed against Muslims. And so that's why we're seeing this massive hatred against Muslims, both in the United States and the United Kingdom. As an example, Tommy Robinson is somebody who wasn't on social media. He was reinstated on X, which I believe he should be because everyone should have free speech. And it's not like, for example, there'll be certain things I agree with him and certain things I disagree with. But the problem is that the things I disagree with, I think that he does it based on an agenda. And so as an example, he was reinstated and he was on there for many months and his following was much less than mine. And then he blew up. But why did he blow up? Was it organic? No, it wasn't. It was people like Elon Musk, people from the United States of America who pushed him, who propagated him, who manufactured his kind of reinvigoration, and then he became who he is. And so why I'm mentioning that is We need to understand the basis of why all of this hatred against Muslims are occurring, all these conversations about grooming gangs. And I think it's worth having that conversation. I'm not saying don't have it. We're going to have this conversation even in this podcast. But this is the real basis behind it. You've got these rich billionaires in the US, in the UK, who are funding these conversations, are funding, not even conversations, funding these hatreds against Muslims. So grooming gangs, of course, is a problem, right? And we'll talk about that now if you want. Because what is the issue? Sorry, if you want to jump in anytime.
No, take your time.
I can talk for England.
I'm happy for you to just go.
Yeah.
This is your platform to go.
So with grooming gangs, there is an issue, right? There's no doubt about it. Like, I disavow the grooming gangs. Where I disagree about the grooming gangs is this claim that it is disproportionately, in a holistic sense, specifically Muslim or Pakistani. My position is this: grooming gang is horrendous. It's disproportionately those Pakistanis in 3 or 4 specific areas. So Rochdale, Rotherham, and Telford. Those areas specifically is disproportionate. But we don't take a specific area and say, guess what, it's disproportionate in those areas. We look at the UK as a holistic thing. And this is where the manipulation of data comes in. Because when you look at the UK as a whole, there is definitely grooming going on, but it's not disproportionately Pakistani. And it's not disproportionately Muslim. In reality, it's almost proportionate. So there's the same amount of white people who do it. And I don't say in terms of numbers. Of course, there's more white people, so the white people are going to do it more.
It's going to be higher.
But the difference, I'm saying proportionally. So whatever the percentage of the UK population of white people is, let's say 78%, that's roughly the percentage of grooming of white people. Whatever the percentage of Pakistanis is, that's roughly the same percentage of grooming of Pakistanis. Now, what they do is they make this false claim. There's a few false claims they make. One is that they use something called the Quilliam Foundation. If you know, Quilliam Foundation is a Muslim Zionist organization that was run by Majid Nawaz, who basically got Tommy Robinson on board. Because if you remember, Tommy Robinson was part of the EDL, and then he disavowed them when he got his contract with Quilliam Foundation for 2 years. And he said, look, I don't want to be part of those are, neo-Nazis or whatever it is. But Quilliam Foundation made the claim that it's 80% Pakistani. And what was their basis? It wasn't some rigorous analysis. What they did was they looked at, guess what? We're going to look at the news. And based on the information that's on the news, it's 80% more Muslim, 80% more Pakistani. Therefore, there's 80% more Pakistanis. But that's not how you do research. Of course, I agree that the media is going to push that position more than anything else. But in reality, you have to look at the numerical amounts of grooming that's occurred, the numerical amounts of pedophilia that's occurred. Now, recently, Tommy Robinson's kind of changed his position, and what he's relying on is the COCP data, and I'll explain that in a second.
What's that?
It's basically a research that was done in 2011 and 2013, and they did a study of about 200 people, if I remember from the top of my head, which I think the data is weak. You can't do a study of 200 people. You need to do a full national, real data. My position is this: none of this data should be hidden, because what's happening is the people who believe it's a Pakistani or Muslim issue are saying they're hiding it. And what I'm saying, they're hiding it as well. I'm saying we want the data and information because, in my view, whenever we get the data and information, it never adds up to their claims. So we have, for example, the data from last year. Last year, the data actually showed the vast majority of sexual assaults in the UK were done by Indians. They're not Muslim. Second, and that was 100. The second was Romanians, I believe, which was 92 times, which is not Muslim. And third was Polish, which was about 88, who are not Muslim, foreign-born sexual abusers. The data from 2020 again shows all of the percentages are proportionate. Now, the COCP data, this is what they do. So first of all, I don't agree with it because amount of 200 isn't enough to get the actual data. But let's just take that. So this is what, like, for example, Tommy Robinson and those people argue. They say that, look, we're going to split the information into two. We're going to split them based on people who partake in abuse of children and abuse of basically abuse and rape of women, but not in a gang of more than 3. So if it's 2, like, it's not going to be part of the data. If it's 1, it's not going to be part of the data. We're going to separate it. So they separated into tier 1 and tier 2. And they said, guess what? Tier 1, that's 100% white because we've separated it. And that is if it's 2 people, 1 person, or if it's children. But if it's more than that, that's Pakistani. And therefore, that means Pakistanis are the ones who are grooming. That's literally how they manufacture. You have to mess around with the data a lot to get to that point. And even then, I reject the entire study, but I'm just demonstrating you how it works. And actually, what does the information show us? There's 500,000 abuse of children in the United Kingdom every year. 500,000. That's a huge amount. And yet people are focusing on a small amount. Now, it's right to focus. Those people who are acting in the manner they're doing, in my view, are not acting as Muslims, and they should be given like the worst punishments, right? Even possibly the death penalty. So like we disavow them completely. But when people try and specify it into that and ignore the rest, then it really isn't about the abuse, is it? It's not really about the grooming, and it's not really about those things. So I think that's where I have an issue. In addition to that, when you look at the data actually shows that it's all proportionate. In addition to that, we've got studies. For example, Ella Cockburn did a study and said, guess what? It is largely not Pakistani, and it's actually all proportionate. Actually, she makes the claim that it's mainly white people, which I don't agree with as well. I think it's all proportionate. Yeah. And so when you've got all of this data and all this information saying the opposite, clearly you're like, what's the basis of the evidence? There is no basis. It is really based on the fact that they're pushing this hatred against these specific groups. Because of course you can find like an Asian or a Pakistani doing something and you could put it on the news once every so many days. That's fine. But if you to put every single abuse, it would be untold. And actually, I did a massive thread where I showed more than 100 people who were either friends with Tommy Robinson, linked with him, or were part of the same ideological group who also got convicted based on these type of things. Now, the other question is this, and that is disproportionate. To be a part of a far-right group, a specific niche group, and to have so many people, that is a lot. Now, in terms of the question mark becomes, because this is one of the arguments, when you bring the data, they say, look, this is the argument. They say, look, it's all been covered up, and therefore we don't have the information. So it's happening, but we don't know. But then the problem with something like that is there's two problems. One is, how can I verify that? You're just making the claim and anyone can say anything. And therefore, we do need a national inquiry, but a proper one, not something based on what Rupert Law does, because we know Rupert Law's one's going to be extremely biased. For example, if you look at Rupert Law's posts, he'll always be like, I want to ban halal, right? And he'll never mention kosher. And many a times, some of us will reply to him and say, what about kosher? And then in the comments, he'll put, oh yeah, and also kosher. But he'll never put it as his main post. And so it demonstrates that really there's this kind of agenda as opposed to really standing by your beliefs.
Do you think there's been a massive cover-up, though, with the grooming gangs? Because I've had victims on from all sides, but they says there was victims over votes. So they says a lot of stuff was swept under the carpet so they could get votes for the Muslim community.
I do believe that there was a cover-up. But according to the inquiry, there was a Rotherham inquiry, there was a Telford inquiry. I've read all of those inquiries. Their claim is this. Their claim is that there has been a massive cover-up, but their claim is that it was covered up not based on a person's race or religion, but it was covered up in terms of incompetency and massive failures. Now, definitely it was a failure, right? Now, are they trying to hide the fact that there are going to be Muslims partaking in this for votes? Well, I don't think so, because what has this election demonstrated? This previous one demonstrated that actually you don't need to appease Muslims. Labour didn't appease Muslims. They stood for the Gaza genocide. They supported all of the most horrific actions there were in Palestine. Most Muslims are pro-Palestine, and definitely the left is pro-Palestine, and yet they won with unfathomable amounts of seats. Now, we know the percentages were a bit dodgy, and we know Reform split the vote with Conservatives. But that being said, clearly you don't need the Muslim votes. The Muslims are going to vote for you irrespective. They just don't have the skills or the kind of congruence or this kind of unity to be able to vote as a bloc. And that's something you find within the Muslim community. They try and make it look like that there's a Muslim invasion of UK. And then people in the US will be like, oh, guess what? We've got, for example, Sadiq Khan, who's the mayor of London, or they'll say Shabana Mahmood, who's now the head of the Home Office, right? But the question mark becomes, like, when it comes to Muslims, when they get in positions of power, do they put Muslims first? Do they put their people first? Do they put their beliefs first? No, they don't. Because if you look at Sadiq Khan, what position has he had that has been pro-Muslim? He goes to probably more Hindu temples than he goes to mosques. He goes and propagates more LGBTQ values over Muslim values. Shabana Mahmood is someone who was part of the pro-Palestine movement. She used to protest for pro-Palestine. And as soon as she came in power, she's banned protests if you do them in the same place more than twice. And that happens in the pro-Palestinian protests. So someone who did the pro-Palestinian protests is banning the pro-Palestinian protests. The second thing she's done is she wrote a massive letter about the grooming gangs. And again, it was based on it. You would not be able to tell the difference if someone like Rupert Law, Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, or she wrote it, right? And so what happens is when these people get into those positions, they sell out to the Zionist lobby. But the difference between them and actually, in my view, Jewish people, when they get into positions of power, they always put their people first. So, for example, Keir Starmer, who is a Jewish Zionist, he's a Jewish man, he's always putting the state of Israel first, right? If you look at people within the cabinet, they'll always put Israel first. If you look at the United States of America, they'll always put Israel first. An example, David Pollock is somebody who was spying on the United States of America for Israel, stole the US secrets and gave them to Israel. He was locked up for 30 years. He was allowed to be released. When he was allowed to be released, he was given a private jet to the Israel by Miriam Edelson. Who is Miriam Edelson? She's Sheldon Adelson, her husband. Sheldon Adelson is an American Jewish guy who has no links to Israel. And yet Donald Trump says, guess what? Whenever they used to come to our office, whenever he used to come and meet them, they'd always advocate for Israel. But he sent him on a private jet to Israel. And even now, Huckabee met him. So why I mention that is that the difference there is when they claim that there's an Islamic takeover of the United Kingdom. That's fake news. If you look at the people in government, they never advocate for Muslims. And if you look at it from the ground, in what sense is there a Muslim takeover? So again, I just wanted to cover that because, again, the point here is grooming gangs, the evidence is weak. And in terms of this Muslim takeover, again, that's just, there is no evidence for it.
So for like grooming gangs, like I say, it's not to target one demographic because there's extremists in all walks of life. There's non-seasoned paedophiles in all walks of life, every skin colour, every religion, every gender. But what do we do to try and fix the problem? Because we're in a world where everybody's point scoring, pointing fingers. Look, it's the Muslims, it's the Christians, it's the whites, it's the whoever. So everybody's fighting against each other. So what would you say or suggest for a safer United Kingdom, for streets to be safer for kids instead of everyone blaming each other?
I think that's an excellent question. I'd say specifically about the grooming gangs, I would do a national inquiry, but not something that is basically where Rupert Law's doing it. Because I don't believe that when he does something, it's going to be in the benefit of the community. Because when you've got basically millionaires like Rupert Law, I believe a lot of his positions, a lot of the things he does is based on the Zionist lobby pushing him. So as an example, we know if you look at many of the events that happen in the United Kingdom, it's always been to harm the working class people, right? So COVID, as an example, the rich became richer. People like Rupert Law financially benefited a lot from the COVID measures. Jewish Zionists benefited a lot from the COVID measures. White working class people and minority working class people are the ones who lost out due to COVID measures. And similarly with any of the things, major events that have occurred, whether it's the Russia-Ukraine war, whether it's Brexit, whether it's any of those things that have happened in our lifetime, in these last 7 or 8 years, it's crazy how so many big events have happened. All of them harm the working class people, and yet the rich billionaires continue to profit. And so I would want a national inquiry, but a balanced one of people fair-minded, people who are honest, who want to look at the data properly. As an example, we've seen it many a times where somebody, if they have been groomed and they don't blame Muslims, they'll be basically sidelined. There was this woman, I forgot her name, is this Sophie or something? She basically said that, look, a lot of the grooming that occurred, some of them were Asian as well, like the victims were, and they basically attacked her. Or there was one where a woman gets on the mic and she says, oh, I have been groomed, and I was groomed by like white guys, and then they pull the mic off her, right? So the point being that in reality, I would want a national inquiry, but I'd want it to be like fair, and I'd want it to be legitimate where there's actual real data points. Because I think that's really important, because anytime we get the data shows the opposite. As an example, one of the things that's big in the United States, and people say in the UK is, oh, UK has fallen. There's a Muslim invasion of the UK, mass migration, Islamic migration. But for something, we do have the data for that. And the data shows the opposite. The data shows that the Muslims in the UK are only 6% of the population. And in 2011, they were only 5% of the population. So the Muslim population from 2011 to 2021 only increased by 1%. So the Muslim population increased by 1%. Christianity dropped. Christianity dropped from 75% to 45%. So there's a 30% drop of Christianity, a 1% increase of Islam, and a 25% increase of atheism. So what's really happened with the UK is, first of all, Christianity has died, but the people who are Christian basically became atheist. And I think the people in the far right and the far left are largely responsible for that, because the far left, because they were basically promoting like liberalist ideologies, which basically are an antithesis to religion. But the far right, what they were doing was they were like, oh, guess what? Islam, it doesn't respect women. It doesn't respect homosexuals. It doesn't respect these traditional values. It respects all these traditional values. And they attacked Islam based on the very things that are found in Christianity. And what end up happening is all of them end up losing the religion. If you look at many of the people in the far right, like most of them are atheists, a lot of them are gay, a lot of them are LGBTQ. Right? And so it's like the greatest irony of this. And the UK and the US is quite a dichotomy, because in the US, you don't have that. In the US, and I know we're going to talk about it later, but in the US, you actually have a far-right movement that isn't controlled by Zionists. You actually have a legitimate far-right movement. But coming back to I don't even know what point I was making, but coming back to when it comes to the UK, when the claim about Islamic invasion, first of all, the data doesn't show that in terms of religion. What about migration? Is most of the migration coming from Muslim countries? The data doesn't show that. The data shows in the last 5 years, the vast majority of migration has actually come from India. And Indians are not Muslim. You have 1 million Indians who come to the UK. Then the second country was China. 350,000 Chinese came into the UK. And the third country was Nigeria. 330,000 Nigerians have come into the country. So the vast majority of the migration into the UK is not from Muslim countries. And so this is an example of it. Then the question mark becomes birth rate. Because another argument they make is, guess what? These people are outbreeding us. They're outpopulating us. Again, the data doesn't show that to be the case. What it shows is when someone comes or migrated from, for example, Pakistan or various other regions, initially when they came, yes, the birth rate was high. But over time, when it goes to the second or third generation, their birth rate diminishes significantly. It goes below 2. So it's like 1.8 to 2.5, depending on what study. Obviously, the white birth rate is a lot lower, and we obviously will speak about that. That's like 1.2 or whatever, which is completely like self-implosion. And so the question mark becomes, is most of the birth rate Muslim? No, it's not. The data actually shows the vast majority of births, foreign births in the United Kingdom from males is Indian, and from females is also Indian. And so this claim that there is this kind of Muslim invasion into the UK is just fake news. It makes no sense. And then someone like Tommy Robinson, who's kind of, many people consider him, and I'm not trying to attack Tommy Robinson, I'm just trying to demonstrate his ideas. He's been put as the position of this kind of far-right movement who's standing against this kind of idea of migration. But then he supports Indian immigration. He supports immigration from Saudi Arabia. So he is someone who supports immigration, and yet he's fighting against it. Now, I'm someone who disagrees with immigration. I think immigration should stop completely. I think we should completely shut the borders. And the reason for it is, I'm not talking about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration is a way of manipulating people in the UK. And because Americans don't know what's happening in the UK, they kind of push it. So in America, as an example, they do have an illegal immigration problem. Because in like 4 years in America, they had 11 million illegal immigrants into the US. In the UK, we only have 40,000 a year. Now, obviously, illegal immigration should stop as well, but there's a huge disparity on that, right? So most of our migration is actually legal migration. And I'm against legal migration because the reason for it is this, that when you bring people in now, especially now in the situation the country's in, for cheap labor, let's say you bring in like 1,000 Indians, right? A working class Brit, let's say he was going to get paid £15 an hour. You're going to get away with paying him like £12 an hour or £10 an hour or £5 an hour because they'll do it for a lot less. And that harms the working class. The only people that benefits is the rich, is the oligarchs, is the billionaires and the millionaires. And so the people who support migration into the UK and the US is actually the rich people. So in the US, as an example, I don't know if you know about this, but there was this big drama about H-1B visas. And that's where I lost my blue check mark on it because I spoke out against the H-1B visas and Elon Musk got upset. And because like, obviously, when I lost my blue check mark, it was 2 reasons. One was the H-1B visas, and then Elon Musk came out to support Tommy Robinson the day after, and I was kind of one of the main people who was against Tommy Robinson on social media. And what happens is when you remove someone's blue check mark, it impacts their engagement. So what happened was with H-1B visas was bringing cheap Indian labor into the United States of America, which harms the American working class. And if you see it, many people on the, you can say far right, but the people on the far right in the US who aren't basically Zionist controlled all spoke out against it. And like Musk got angry. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to go to war with you people because it's the rich who want migration. It's the rich who want cheap labor. It only harms the working class." And actually, this is one of the kind of mental confusions that the people on the left have, because the far left now is no longer left wing. Because what were left wing ideals? It was to protect the working class, and it was to and this is why a lot of people are moving to Tommy Robinson. So I understand the logic of why, because it was to protect the working class, and it was to be anti-war. And what's happened? The left now doesn't care about protecting the working class. They're like, we want migration. We want all of these things that harm society. We don't care if there's affordability issues. And they've become liberals. And liberalism has basically taken over the left. And now being left is like being woke, being pro-feminist and all these type of ideas. But actually, when you look at working class values, they were always left-wing positions. That is something the left should have pushed. But then what happened is, because they kind of ignored the working class who are struggling in the UK, there is no doubt in our minds that the UK is struggling. We're struggling because of cost of living. Things are expensive here. The infrastructure's horrible here. Everything is breaking down. But why is it breaking down? It's breaking down because of the rich. And when I say rich, I'm not being horrible, but it's basically Jewish Zionist billionaires and millionaires who are taking over the country. When you say BlackRock, who is it? It's Jewish Zionist people. So these people are taking over our country. They have control over our country. They are the rich in our country. And the poor people, they've got them fighting amongst each other. And that's the real aim of it, because the race issue, is something that's new? No, it's not. We've had race riots and fights amongst people of different races or religions in the UK many a times. It happens, it blows over, and then people move on. But they always escalate. You know, for example, the 2001 Tottenham riots, or for example, the 2011 Bradford riots, or the Southport riots last year because of like what people like Tommy Robinson basically promoted and caused. But the point being, these riots have happened many a times. And so the aim is always to get both sides angry, fight amongst each other while they're fine. So even the Southport riots, do you remember when they happened? And this happened to BLM in the US as well. So if you look at BLM in the United States of America, BLM was basically people from the black population who felt like they weren't getting rights. And so then they were protesting, they were rioting. But if you look at the areas that they were rioting in, where were they? It wasn't rich suburbs. It was
their own areas.
Exactly. It was working class, ethnic minority and black areas.
But do you know who that was funded by? Black Lives Matter. Do you know who funded it?
Yeah, I do. Who was it funded by?
BlackRock.
And who else?
It was funded by, what's his name? Is it Soros? Soros.
What's his
George?
What's his ethnicity?
White, Jewish.
I mean, I don't think they're the same. So
yeah,
this is the issue you've got, basically. That's the point. It's always the same people who are involved.
But this is the problem I have.
Yeah.
It's I don't have any problems with legal immigration. I think we're living in a society where people think illegal immigration's got everything to do with race. Illegal immigration has nothing to do with race.
Yeah.
The Scottish, the Irish, the Polish have went to New York and all over the world.
True.
Illegal immigration, as a father, what I'm big on is free speech. What I'm big on is illegal immigration. I believe you should not be able to enter a country unless you have the right paperwork.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. That's just common sense. It's nothing to do with race. Polish, Russian, if they want to come here, you've got to have the right paperwork. Reason being, if you're causing destruction, if you're causing mayhem and harming children, you can just disappear again. A lot of people are coming over in boats and throwing in their passports in the water. They've got a little sheet to say you're gay and there's certain things they're following so they can get. And refugees are more than welcome. Reason being, America and the UK have destroyed more countries than anyone. If a family wants to have a better life, by all means, give them it. What I see is humans. Now, that's what I need to stay with and stay down the middle, that we're all human. I don't care if you're Muslim, Christian. I have my own thoughts and opinions on certain religions. I believe it can be a bit culty. I believe it's great to have a belief. I believe that a higher power. I believe people can be manipulated. But we need to be careful now as well. We feel as if the world is turning into a war zone. Yeah. The world ain't that bad. True. You walk along the streets, you don't really see that much. Like, there's a lot of great people, and the majority of people, white, black, gay, straight, male, female, they want to just go on with their life. True. You know, social media is turning us against each other to hate this person, to hate that person, because what change gets done without any compromise? What change gets done without any conversation to understand? We're getting the wool pulled over our eyes by the hierarchies to think everybody's to blame. Yeah. But in reality, we're actually okay. like social media has made us turn against each other, and I was gravitating towards that, but I'm not, because now I'm questioning it all to realise I don't care who the fuck you are. If you're good to me, I'm good to you. You're my brother, you're my sister. I go to Dubai, Muslim city, one of the best cities in the world. I have no issues. Every Muslim I know is sound. They treat me well, I treat them well. They don't try and force their agenda. Same as Christians, the same as people who've been in prison. I interview murderers and bank robbers and drug lords. I have no issues with them because they treat me well and they're trying to do better. You know, but the only thing I have about Islam is because the Muslim boys run the prison system.
Yeah.
So I have an issue with they would recruit anyone, and that's including paedophiles, that's including the bad. I don't agree with that. I think if you harm our children, you should be excluded from life. You know, I don't. And
are you talking about in prisons? Or
in prisons, they're recruiting a lot of people in prisons, no matter who it is.
Yeah.
And people want to be part of that brotherhood as well. But I have an issue with that because I believe in forgive and forget, but not if you harm a child.
Agree.
There's no forgiving, you know, because there's no change in the mind. I just don't like the fact that anybody can be recruited, you know.
But just on that, in terms of prisons, and guys, I'm not an expert on that, so you'll know better.
Yeah.
So on prisons, from my understanding is that what happens is when you go into prison, it becomes like kind of like groups and gangs.
Yeah.
And you're either going to be part of like the Muslim gang, or you're going to be part of like the Aryan gang, or you're going to be part of whatever the other gangs are, which you know more better than me. And so what happens is, from my understanding, like the Muslim gangs in prison are a little bit more powerful than the rest of the gangs. And so therefore they wield a lot of power. And so many people will probably, I'm guessing, join them in order for like safety and protection.
Yep.
And so that's just criminals, right? Criminals in prisons act in this manner. If there wasn't Muslim gangs, I presume, because I don't know if you ever watched that TV show Oz, right? They used to have like all these different gangs. And if it wasn't Muslim gangs, people would just be part of other kind of either race-based gangs, religious-based gangs, ideological gangs in prison, some to try and get protection, some to like safety, because the concern is that it is like aggressive. Is that how it is? Or?
Yeah, I just think they should be excluded. They should not, and if they want to go to a religion, then do it yourself. I don't think they should be accepted anywhere.
Yeah.
But like you say, as prison, people are willing to join these gangs for that extra bit of protection, especially with those charges. But that's the issue. That's my issue, because I speak to a lot of people from prisons, and the Muslim boys run the prison system. There's no denying it, because they've got Friday and the thing when they're going and praying, they're creating that brotherhood, and it's the fastest growing religion in the world. And like I say, when I go to Dubai, it's the best city in the world. I have no issues with any religions. I'm at a stage though, I don't think Muslims and Christians can be actually in the same countries anymore, because I just think that there's so much conflict. I think everybody now is trying to overpower. You know, there's many Muslim countries, I think there's over 50. Many Christian countries are both over 2 billion, I think, follow each religion. I just think there's too much ego and there's too much extremism in both that everybody tries to win now, and it could be a massive war. And I think the war is going to be not white and black. I think it's going to be Christian and Muslim. I think it's going to be a religion war. I think that's where the higher powers are trying to cause. I think, well, the point of the thing is, that's the way I see it. And listen, I could be wrong. I could be, but that's the way I'm seeing it. And I just don't think now people are getting on. I think social media has went too far with it, because in the UK, you would think it was the Muslims causing all the destruction. You'd think it was illegal immigrants, it's the only people who cause mayhem here. It's not the case. It's the majority white here. I mean, the white people is the world's majority. We're only 10-12% of the world's population. We are the 7-10%. We are the minority.
Yeah, true.
You know, so I just think though we're using skin color, we're using religion as a way of blaming others. We all need to look at ourselves. We all need to stop pointing fingers. We all need to look, okay, what's the issue here? Let's work together. Can Muslims who are high up in those communities expose other Muslims? That's another concern, where because it's in the religion, is it not part of, you can't stick another person in if they do wrong? What is that?
So I'll explain all those points.
Please.
So in terms of Muslim and Christians, I agree with you that there is confrontation happening between them, but I believe it's manufactured by the Zionists. By the Zionists, and I'll explain to you why. So the question mark becomes, and this question for you before I answer your question, and ask me again if I forget. Why do you think that they're not compatible, Islam and Christianity?
I just think because of the way social media is, I think it's turned everybody against each other. And there's many religions, there's many gods, but I just think now we're at, mosques are getting burnt down, churches are getting burnt down. Look what's happening in Nigeria, and there's no media coverage. You know, I just think we're at a stage where whoever's being paid, like you say, you believe people are being paid to turn against Muslims.
Yeah.
And I think it's also been the same in the other way. I think people are being turned against each other. So if people are being turned against each other, then they're going to believe their religion's right and they're fighting for their religion because they want to kill and die for their people. So now I just think people are then making out their religions better than one another. I believe there's a God. Jesus has spoken many religions. He spoke in the Quran. He spoke in the Bible. The Abraham, what have we got? What's the Abrahamic religions?
Judaism, Christianity,
and Islam.
Yeah.
They're all sort of similar.
They are, yeah.
You know, but we're living in a world where I just feel as if I see it the way it is on social media, everybody's getting turned against each other. And I see it as a religious war. I don't see it as a colour. I don't see it as a country. I see it as becoming religious because it's the two biggest forces in the world is Christianity and Islam. But I just don't see we're in a place anymore where people can live together. That's the way I'm seeing it. And that's sad because religion should be about peace. It should be about love. It should be about understanding. But it's not because we're taking the negatives from the religion and using it against each other. And that's where the conflicts come in. There's been many wars over the years, not over thousands of years over religion. But I just feel as if that could be the biggest indicator for another world war. And I could be wrong, but that's just the way I'm seeing it.
I agree with you. I believe that there is this kind of attempt to make Muslims and Christians fight amongst each other. But where I disagree is I think Islam and Christianity is very similar. There's not much difference between them. And this is why when people always ask this question, I'm always like, what's the difference? Tell me something that you got a problem with Islam that isn't found in Christianity and Judaism. And actually, you will never be able to find it. And so in reality, when it comes down to it, there's actually not much difference. And this is why I do believe that people attempt to get these two religions to fight. It's why I never fall into that trap. If you look at me, I get many opportunities to debate Christians. And I always say, I never debate Christians and I never debate like within Islam because I just think this is done intentionally to cause friction. I'll debate ideas. So I'll, for example, debate Zionism or debate Israeli control of the United States and the UK and various other things. But I think that is something that's harming all of the people in my country, which is the UK, and everybody in the United States where I spend a lot of time with, who I've got a lot of friends with. So this is the reason why I speak out against that. But in terms of this intentional destruction that's occurring, I agree with you because, and it's done by, in my view, the Zionists, because what happened was, in my view, not in my view, I can prove it, that from people who are from the Jewish perspective, and you have to understand from their perspective, in their view, they've been abused for a very long time, mainly by Christians, right? In their view. And what happened was this culminated in the Holocaust, right? And for them, that was like the worst thing that ever happened. And if you know their mantra, they always say, never again. And they really believe that. They say it, but they believe it. They say like, never again. We're never going to allow this to happen again. And then from their perspective, they think like, how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Who are our biggest threats? So our biggest threats are Christians, white Christians, and Muslims. We need to make sure those two people never harm us again. How do we make sure we do that? So when you look at both people, the different types of people, Muslims are more ideological. And what I mean by that is harder to take away their religion from them. But in my view, they're a lot weaker in a physical sense. They're not very good at fighting, right? They're not warriors. On the other hand, Christians, it's the opposite. You can take away their belief and ideology away. You've seen Christianity in the UK die within 10 years. But they're very warrior-like. They fight, right? And so I believe they targeted these two people, made them fight on purpose. So the way they targeted them was they took control over Western governments, the US, UK, Australia, the various Western governments, and they destroyed their society from within. So that's by promoting certain ideologies that do destroy society. For example, feminism, liberalism, all of these different ideologies. And this is why you see in the West, the decrease of religion. You also see a population collapse. And I talked about population collapse 10 years ago. What does that mean? That means that, for example, for every 2 white people, if you're only having 1 child, you're halving your population. And so it's this self-destruction. But why that was done was through the media, through government policies, and through various other things. They did it to the black population as well, through music and through housing policies in the United States of America. And so you destroy them ideologically. And then Muslims, you destroyed them physically. And this is why you basically bombed the Middle East and bombed all these various places. And you caused destruction in them, which, as you said, caused a refugee crisis, but also destroyed their countries. And this idea that basically those people in those countries are not amiable to the West is ridiculous, because if you look at now, the countries that are most pro-West are what? Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar. They're the most fundamentalist. Probably, in my view, some of their positions are extreme, even within Islam. I don't agree with their positions. If you look at my writings before I became big on X, because when I became big on X, I specifically focused on politics. But before that, I used to write against extremism within Islam. And so they're good with them. But if you look at the other Middle Eastern countries, they're bombing them, and they're a lot more liberal. And I'm not saying liberalism is good, and I'm not saying they're liberal, but I'm saying they're not extreme. So if Lebanon, example, if you go to Lebanon, they've got a flipping crazy nightlife. It's like being in America. It's like being in the UK. And yet they're bombing their country. And so this idea that basically they hate the West is fake. Obviously, in my view, they're bombing those countries for Israel. And that is harming the United States and the UK. And in reality, no one wants to speak about it. But the real problem in our nations is the Zionist control, because I think that's what's actually causing poverty. That's what's causing our infrastructure harm. That's what's causing the working class to fight amongst each other. And then they'll highlight places like Nigeria. And there is an issue in Nigeria. There's no doubt about it, right? There is Christians being killed. There are Muslims being killed, but from my research, disproportionately, it is Christians who are being killed. But it's being killed by who? It's being killed by ISIS. It's being killed by Boko Haram. Who created ISIS? We have documentary evidence that the US government with Israel and Saudi Arabia facilitated these extreme elements within the Middle East and these African nations in order to attack. And so when I have Muslims on my shows and Christians from Nigeria, the Christians say it is the Muslims doing it, no doubt about it. I have to be honest. The Muslims say it's the extremist Muslims who are doing it, and they're coming to our mosque and doing it to us as well, because we're not the right extreme sect that they're in.
So what's the difference then from a Muslim and an extreme Muslim?
So, for example, for me, I believe Islam is the most peaceful religion. If you look at the Quran, I would say it's the most relaxed religion compared to everybody else. Now, I'm not saying it's liberal. No, it's not. And let me give you an example. Like, for example, homosexuality. In Islam, in the Quran, it says homosexuality is not permissible. So it means you can't, like, basically partake in homosexual action. In the Bible and in the Torah, it says kill the homosexual, right? So what's harsher, killing the homosexual or saying it's not permissible? Killing the homosexual. So that's an example of how the Quran forbids something, but there is not this extreme action against it. And then within Islamic law, Sharia law, and we should talk about that as well in a bit, but Sharia law, we have like, people say, oh, Sharia law taken over. But people don't know what Sharia law is. Sharia law is just how one practices the religion, and if it was a Muslim country, the legal edicts within the religion. So as an example, within Islam, you have like more than one form of Sharia law. There's the Hanafi school, there's the Maliki school, there's the Shafi school, there's the Hanbali school. Hanafis is followed by the most people. Within the Hanafi school, if someone partakes in homosexual activity, it needs to be in public. It needs to be where 4 people have witnessed it. And the punishment for heterosexual public display is also the same. So in reality, the punishment is public display of homosexual behavior or heterosexual behavior. There is a punishment, and the punishment is lashing, right? And then what you've got is, you've got one extreme group, which is an extreme minority, who may take that and say, look, we're going to kill them as well. And they'll hold the same position as, for example, the Bible or the Torah. So extremism within Islam, what they do is, in my view, a lot of them are either they'll take the text and take it as an extreme aspect, but it's an extreme minority. But largely speaking, what we find is those people who are taking part in these extreme actions or even terrorism. I don't agree with the word terrorism because I think it's created just solely for Muslims, that word. But if you look at these extreme actions, it's not even done in the basis of religion. So, for example, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, it's now universally confirmed based on academics and researchers and journalists that when they were taking part in those actions, they were doing it based on being men for hire. So what that means is whoever paid them the most, they would go on their side. And so they basically overthrew Syria, they overthrew all the Middle East, and it was done based on being paid. And just think about it, you're in the Middle East, you're in Central Asia, because there was many people like, people from Central Asia who were going there, people from different regions. It was based on being paid as opposed to some kind of religious ideology. And so what happens is you kind of meld this kind of religious ideology with this idea of these people being for hire. So once you separate that, you realize that actually it's less got to do with extremism and more to do with being meant for hire. But now, there is people, for example, in the US, less so in the US, in the UK, who do partake in some extreme actions. We saw recently, right, in the synagogue where the guy did like something extreme outside. He killed one person, and then I believe the police killed the other people. But if you look at him, he's someone who was extreme, but again, his position was extreme. Now the question mark becomes, he was someone who was known by the intelligence agencies. So why wasn't he not picked up? I do believe that they push this and propagate this. But even then, there is this position that he obviously has, which is extreme, even though I do think that he's been used by people in order to enact these actions.
What about then, how many mosques in the UK?
I believe there's about 3,000, right?
So I believe in countries having culture. I believe culture is a great thing. When I go to countries, I love the culture. I love the flags. I love their foods. I love everything about it because it's different.
Yeah.
You know? But what people may be a bit scared of is having over 3,000 mosques. The UK, I don't think, is a Christian nation really anymore. Anyway, I believe it used to be. But in the Middle East, you're not allowed chapels or churches. You're not allowed. You'll not see anybody in power who's maybe Christian. A lot of it is from their own side. Can you see why a lot of people might be nervous of the overpowering of something growing so fast in their country as well?
This is a very good question. So in the Middle East, you do have churches.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Yeah. So for example, Dubai, they've even got Hindu temples. Like people are angry with them that they've got Hindu temples, and some people will call them out for that. So Dubai has it, and the Middle East has it. The Middle East has Hindu temples, synagogues, all those places.
Chapels or churches?
Yeah, churches. They have churches as well. The only place that doesn't have it is Saudi Arabia. But and I believe they're lax in their policy as well. But with Saudi, and by the way, I'm for anyone practicing their religion anywhere. Like, I don't agree with it.
That's the only reason why I asked, because I know you says you believe people can get on, but that's why I'm saying, well, there's not really anything in the Middle East, because there is mosques all over Europe, and it is the fastest growing religion in the world.
Yeah, there is chapels and churches.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Churches in the Middle East, but in Saudi Arabia there's not. Now people make the argument that it's the same as the Vatican. So you know how the Vatican, you can never have a mosque because it's the specific a place for the Catholic Church. That is how Saudi Arabia is for Muslims, and so it's a specific place where there is these kind of number one holy site for Muslims, and that's where the kind of similarity is. So you know how in the Vatican you can't basically have a synagogue, and you can't have a mosque.
Understand, but the Vatican itself was probably maybe another podcast. The Vatican City, like, that is mad what that's about, and the underground tunnels in there, like, it's unbelievable. But you're happy for chapels, churches to be anywhere in the world, obviously not Saudi Arabia, if the Vatican...
No, I'm fine with it being in Saudi Arabia as well.
Yeah.
So I'm just giving you the example of how Saudi Arabia is the same as Vatican. I actually think people should be able to practice their religion wherever they want. I think that people should have freedom, and I'm a big believer in free speech. So I'm not someone who basically disavows that. But in terms of there being mosques in the UK, there is a large number of mosques in the UK, but that's just because Muslims practice, right? Muslims are very practicing. You are seeing a lot of churches close down. People get angry when a church is converted into a mosque, but actually what it shows is a lot of churches are shutting down. They're being converted into nightclubs, pubs, local bars, social areas,
houses,
and also houses as well as mosques. So there is this basically collapse of religion in the UK, and I think it's a huge problem. By the way, I actually think that the UK should be a Christian country. I believe that the UK should be majority white. And the reason is because of what you said, which is that you need to have certain cultures and certain ideas that kind of breathe life into that place, which differentiates it from others. As someone who travels a lot, I go to Japan, I go to US, I've traveled the world. So I agree with you in that regard. But the issue you've got is, with this kind of what's happening in terms of the minimization of religion, that in my view is happening intentionally in order to harm. And I do think the UK is a Christian country. But my question to you is this: what is culture? First of all, you said it's the people, which I believe you said is white people. So I guess your position is that you want it to remain majority white, which is what it is right now. So I guess it's like whatever it is now, but maybe not have too much immigration. It's like 75% white at the moment.
I mean, 97 in Scotland. There's no issues.
Yeah.
But like I says, we spoke earlier, it's under 10% of the whole world white minority. Right? We are the minority
in the world. Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? So if
there is a population collapse as well.
Yeah, of course, because white people are only having, like you say, one child. Divorce rate is through the roof.
Exactly.
Some people ain't even having kids.
Exactly.
So within the next possibly 100 years, 200 years, these numbers might come down to 5%, and it's only going to be, it keeps going further than you're talking white percent, and before you know it, there could be fucking nobody.
I agree.
You know, because we've got the gayest generation we've ever lived in. We've got.
But do you think that was natural?
Nah, when they talk about poisoning the waters to turning people gay and making them more feminine, the roles have reversed between men and women. Women are becoming more masculine, not that they want to be. It's men have become more feminine.
True.
So now men...
But do you think that was done intentionally?
Of course, because they want to depopulise the world. That's what only the information that I have. I don't have all the answers, and people...
But not everybody's being depopularised.
Yeah, of course.
It's mainly white people. So what's the reason?
I don't know. Genuinely don't know. I don't have all the answers. I can only get the information I get and maybe make an assumption. People can call me a conspiracy theorist as well, but white people are the minority, and we're close to just dwindling down those numbers because we're not having enough children. There's not family structure anymore. There's no family morals. True. And one thing I'll say about the Muslim community, their family morals are so strong. Yeah. You'll very seldomly see a Muslim mother or father in an old folks home. Their kids look after them. Their morals of the family and having 4 and 5 kids. We used to have that. Christians used to have those values. Married at 16, 17. Women were virgins. Men went out and provided and protected. The roles have reversed. Women have got 3 and 4 children to multiple men. We've got OnlyFans. We've got porn. We've got drugs. We've got alcohol. Divorce rates through the roof. Women are then... 80% of women then want a divorce because the social media is making... them think that they have a better life. The most important thing, and I will always state this, women are the centre of the universe. The universe revolves around women, I believe, because the way they can carry a child, the way that energy changes, the way that they understand life, women give life. I believe men build the world, women create it, and I think we're just so lost in a society. I believe men should provide and protect, but I just think we're so confused, including myself. Sometimes I feel as if I have it figured out, and other times I think I'm just completely fucking lost.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think you've made like a lot of important points. I just agree with everything you said there, by the way. But what just to add to what you're saying, this has been done intentionally, and I believe it's done by the Zionists in order to basically destroy the white population. And my evidence is who controls the media, who controls the government, who controls the policies, who controls the NGOs. It's the same people. That being said, the question mark becomes, what is British culture? And I think this is really an important question because people talk about it, but I feel like they can never be concrete about it.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So because I'm third generation. So when my grandparents, for example, my grandfather fought in the World War II with the Alliance. And then after the basically colonization of India, which later became India and Pakistan, they came over. So they came over in the 60s, early 60s. And so I'm third generation, my children are fourth generation. When my grandfather came over, he came over with this idea, and they came to the north of England, Middlesbrough, and they basically thought, we're coming over, we're going to come for a temporary period of time, we're going to try and make some money, and we're going to go back. They worked in one of the most like brutal jobs, as you know, at that time. It was like the coal mines, it was the steel factories. It wasn't good conditions to work in, right? Not how we've got it now, it's easy. And so they worked in brutal conditions. And when they came to the UK, they thought, oh, guess what? We've come here. Okay, people will call us a packy, or people will insult us, but look, we're foreigners. We're just going to take the abuse and we'll just carry on. But in addition to that, they thought we're going to be here for a temporary period of time and then we're going to leave. But when they came to the UK also, they thought, wait a sec, what is British society? What is British culture? They're Christians. They have the same value as us. They believe in the family. They believe in the nuclear family. They believe in the family structure. They believe in Christian values. All the things that you mentioned, right? They believe in, for example, defined gender roles. They believe in having children. They believe in God. They believe in looking out for your community. It's a society. And I thought, wow, it's very similar to our religion. There's not much. We can definitely become part of this. And so therefore they came on that basis. And they ended up staying because the society was very similar to what one would consider Muslim society, or what the society that they came from before. But so that's what the culture was then.
Yeah, it's not a culture now.
Now that's not the culture. Now the culture is liberalism, feminism, LGBTQ, these type of ideas. And so for someone in the 60s, whether it was my grandfather or maybe even your grandfather, the culture was different to what it is now. And so the question, and the evidence of my point is, for example, in schools, Ofsted, who come and basically examine schools, they'll come in to see if you've got British values. Very important. We all want British values, right? But what is the thing that they check to see if you've got British values? If you're teaching LGBTQ in schools, if you're teaching feminism, if you're teaching liberalism. So those in power have told us what they believe British values is. But those British values aren't the same as what our family members came to the UK for in the first place. So that's one thing. So I think British culture is different now to what it was before. And this kind of semi-revival of Christianity is an attempt to take the culture back to the 1960s. And what that shows you in the UK is the culture is ever changing. It's not the same as the US. In the US was basically founded and built by white Christian Protestants. And they still control the kind of fabric of what American culture is or American society is. In the UK, we don't have that. We've had a massive shift and a massive change. And in addition to that, when our father, and this is why I disagree that basically Muslims have not, or Pakistanis or Muslims have not assimilated. I think it's the opposite. I think what's happened is they've assimilated so much, they've become the same. And I think I don't know if it's a good thing or not, because for example, me, I'm a nerd, right? So I just read books. But when I look at, for example, the Southport riots, and I do believe it was inflamed because for example, Axel Radowanka, they claimed that he was a Muslim, right? And they then went and protested outside, went and rioted and tried to attack mosques. And so what happened was these guys who you mentioned with baseball bats came and defended, right? And both sides, when I looked at it, I was like, I don't like either of them. They're both acting like the same. The Muslims and the kind of Tommy Robinson's crew or the far right were acting in the same manner because they've basically become the same people. If you come to the north of England, these people act in the same manner. Now, it's not the way I act because I'm like a nerd, right? I'm a podcaster, I'm a streamer, I don't go out. But that being said, that's the product of assimilation because our grandfathers actually hadn't probably assimilated. So when someone smashed their windows in, they just stayed in the house. And now what happens is someone smashes someone's windows in who's, for example, a Pakistani or Muslim. They're like, wait a sec, I'm British. I'm going to come out and attack you. And so if you look at working class people in the north, I believe they act in the same manner.
Yeah, but that's where the divide comes in then.
Yeah.
Because nobody's different. They've got everybody fighting against each other without actually asking questions. There's murderers in all colours.
True.
Now, what he did was fucking wrong, and it's very disturbing. And the media keeping it back fueled it even more, as if there was something suspicious.
Yeah.
So it's all a big game. We're being played.
I agree.
We're being played, and we're falling into their hands. We're making it easier for them, including wars.
Yeah.
All war for me is murder.
Exactly.
I don't care who you are. Now, I've interviewed a lot of soldiers from all walks of life, and I've got nothing but respect for people who serve their country. It's the same as 9/11, inside job. But as soon as 9/11 happened, you've got everybody patriotic, want to fight for the country, and rightly so. If people try to invade Scotland, I would have to protect more. I would get the boots on and grab a rifle. But why are these people want to invade our island? So you've got 9/11, people wanted to fight for their country, and then it never became apparent that it was an inside job. So people who have lost their life for their own countries, same as Britain, have invaded over 90% of this world. So when people want to fight for their country, I've no issues with men thinking they're doing it, because people join the army for so many different reasons. Get away from the household, a better life, travel the world, make some money. Exactly. Some people have got anger in them, they just want to kill people, but the majority of people just want to have a better life. It's not until 10 years, 20 years later they start questioning, why was there no weapons of mass destruction but we killed over 1 million Iraqis? Why did we take their oil? Why did Saddam Hussein get killed? Why was the biggest cash robbery in history over £1 billion from Saddam Hussein? You look at Gaddafi, what he did to these people. There's never any good dictators, but if you actually look at Tony Blair and Obama and what the destruction they two have caused, especially Tony Blair, now you look at his son with digital ID, there's so many questions. Why in this day, in this human race, have we got humans killing other humans? You know, I think it was the Second World War, I think it was Christmas Day, when I think the British and the Germans stopped fighting and they played football.
Yeah.
I think, we're all human.
I agree.
But all the history books, you're a historian, you'd have read many history books.
Yeah.
So I'm at that stage now, I'm even questioning those books.
Definitely.
Because everything's been a fucking lie.
True.
You look at Hitler, there's a lot of videos now come out about this mad bastard that I was always told to hate him, which is understandable what they've done to Jews. But now there's question marks of how many Jews actually got killed. There's question marks over the gas chambers as well. Because you could read something and you can take it away, something different from me. We can look at a tumbler and it could be half full. You could think it's half empty. I could think it's half full. people's minds are different. There's been a study to prove that we think differently. So we can read a paragraph and see it totally different. But I'm at the stage now I've got to question everything. I don't know about Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, Tony Blair. I'm only getting fed this information. In 100 years, there's going to be books about COVID vaccine. There's going to be books about lockdown. It was like a plague. Everybody was locked in the house. When you're reading that, you're thinking, man, look at what they lived through. When it was all a fucking hoax anyway. It was all a hoax. People are banging pots and pans and whatever we went through in lockdown. I believe it's a test run for what bigger things are to come, because that then shows me how dumb humans are. And it's not that, and I don't want to put us all down, but human beings follow order.
Agreed.
And they followed order. And that shows me how, because the power of people is stronger than the people in power. There's only a few thousand of them. There's billions of us, but yet we're so caught up in this rat race. The schooling system was set up by John Rockefeller in the early 1900s. Feminism kicked in. John Rockefeller seen a woman with a sign about rights to vote. And he said, you know what, I'm going to let them vote. Because instead of men just paying taxes, we'll get the women working, get them paying taxes. Then if both are paying taxes, where does our kids go? They come into the system where we'll brainwash them about things. Who gives a fuck about your timetables and other things when we should be concentrating on now? We should be concentrating on inventions. We should be concentrating on helping humankind and being a better society, being a better world. But we're just caught up in such a rat race that we all just feel a hate. Will I ever see a better world? I don't think so in my time. But for the younger generation, they've now got so damaged by social media. They're vaping, they're drinking, they're having sex. Such a young age, we've got porn. Like, we're so disconnected. And that's why we can't ask the real questions, because we're so full of static and noise, you know?
Yeah. So, first of all, I agree with it, with everything you said. You need to do that. You need to question everything. People are sheeps. Like, people just listen and follow and then never analyze. Whenever I'm speaking to people, I'm saying, okay, where's the evidence for that? Where's the claim for that? Where's the basis of that? Most people, 99.9% of people aren't able to produce it, because in reality, people don't research, people don't study, people don't look at things critically. I mean, the benefit of what happened with COVID is that now people realize that this was a massive scam on everyone, right? But again, it comes back to the same thing, like, who are the people who are trying to do this? So when you mention the war in Iraq, of course, it was something that was planned well before. You had Netanyahu, who went to the US and said, we need to take out Iraq. You had, for example, the clean break memo, which was mainly by the Jewish Zionists, who said, we need to take out these countries: Iraq, Syria, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and they took them out. And so when you look at what happened in Iraq, I mean, I don't think it was for money. It was clearly to basically disrupt the area for Israel, because these countries were considered rivals for them. And so, because when it comes to oil, they already had policies in place where it was basically food stamps for oil. So they would already be basically taking oil off them for hardly anything. But in reality, what it was is to basically Saddam, who was basically a US asset, was then used in order, basically they then turned on him because they wanted to attack and destroy the Middle East. 9/11, you're right, it was an inside job. Who was involved in the inside job? It was 3 countries. It was the United States of America, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. And these 3 countries have been involved in everything that's happened over the last 25 years, including the destruction of the Middle East, including Libya. Gaddafi was like a massive secularist, a feminist. His entire bodyguards were women. So this was a guy who wasn't like some extreme fundamentalist, as what they try and claim. They destroyed Syria. Bashar al-Assad was overthrown by these people. The entire destruction of the Middle East was solely done for Israel and for their interests. And you mentioned about like British people. Yeah, British people sacrificed them, but unfortunately they did it for a foreign nation. So when you say that if someone invaded Scotland, you would defend them. But the question mark becomes like, would someone, and this is why most Brits have woke up and they're like, we wouldn't actually fight a foreign war for somebody else now. And because most Brits realize that when these foreign wars are happening, they aren't happening for Britain. They're happening for Israel, or they're happening for the Zionists. There's for outside interests that aren't for the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I wouldn't fight for Britain. I wouldn't go somewhere. Muhammad Ali says it perfect.
Exactly.
When he says, why am I going and killing someone of colour and I don't even know that person? That's why he ended up in prison. Exactly. This man was so ahead of his time.
Exactly.
But it takes balls to stand up against the grain, because they will discredit you, they will tarnish your nail, they will put you in prison, they'll freeze your bank accounts. Like, it is difficult to then, it's great to say everything's free speech, but it's not free speech, because me and you, I guarantee, are still scared to say things. Yeah. We know a lot what's going on in the world, but there's certain things we know, I can't say that, because they will fucking take my social media away, they will discredit. So there's just so much. I would never go and fight for someone else, but then I did try and join the Marines at 18 years old, again, that's the path I was on at that time.
It's a lot of young working class kids in the UK. Like my daughter's school, all the boys are like, oh, we're going to join the army. And they've been conditioned into joining it, unfortunately. But this is like a mass manipulation, because in reality, when you look at what's happening, this, like you mentioned that you respect the army. And this is the problem you have. Like, I know, again, it seems like I mentioned Tommy Robinson. By the way, I did offer him a debate, but he agreed to it, but then he didn't basically continue on with it. Is the point about Israel. He is someone who isn't putting the British interest first. And the problem with that is, for example, when the 3 British military personnel got killed in Israel, he ridiculed them. So clearly it's not about Brits. Clearly it's not about the British army. It's for this foreign state of Israel. And in reality, this is the biggest problem we have in the UK. When we've got people in the far right who are against immigration, who are against like many of these things, we don't have anyone who isn't Zionist controlled. This is what differentiates the UK to the US. As you know, in the US, there's this massive difference. Where in the US, there is actually this non-Zionist controlled right or far right, however you want to call it, who do speak out against Israel.
But have you got proof of these people working for them?
What do you mean?
Like Tommy and stuff, is a proof?
I proved it. He was paid by Robert Shulman, right? So this is without a shadow of a doubt. And Robert Shulman, as I explained before, is an American Jewish Zionist billionaire who funds the IDF, who funds Israeli propaganda, who funds all of these things, anti-Islam hatred, and also funded Tommy Robinson.
Like, what is a Zionist then to you, for people who don't know? Because we see that word getting thrown about all the time, but what is a Zionist?
So for me, a Zionist is someone who believes in Jewish supremacy. So they believe that Jewish people are more superior to non-Jews. Because my position is this: I believe it doesn't matter if you're white, black, brown, yellow, whatever race you are. It doesn't matter if you're Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Hindu, whatever it is. All man is equal. There is no superiority. It doesn't matter who you are. Each person has a different skills. You can say each race or religion or whatever has, race is probably the best way to just describing it, has different skills and has different deficiencies, but nobody is more superior to another person. In terms of Jewish supremacy, is this idea that actually Jews are more superior to non-Jews. And it doesn't mean to be a Zionist, you don't need to be just Jewish. Actually, the vast majority of Zionists are not Jewish, but the majority of Jewish people are Zionist. And so there's this idea of, and so what we find in society is how this replicates is because it's based on foreign wars. It's based on the destruction of societies. It's based on the fact that Israel has this kind of supremacist ideals, which is, for example, if you're a Jewish person, there's certain laws in Israel which benefit Jews over Gentiles. And Gentile is someone who is a non-Jew. So you could be a Christian or a Muslim or white or black or whatever it is. If you're not a Jew, then you're called a Gentile or a Goyim. And so it's this idea of, for example, the right to return. If you're a Jewish person and you've never been to Israel and you have no connection to Israel other than saying that you're a Jewish person, you get the ability to return to Israel. You have the right to return, even though you've got no connection. Whereas a Palestinian, their parent or grandparent can be from Palestine. If they're removed from the country and they want to go back, they're not allowed back. So this is an example of Jewish supremacy. But also what they do is they work as a collective, and this could be Jews or non-Jews, but Zionists work as a collective in order to benefit Israel or to basically benefit Jews as a group in the world. And this is what the basis of like what Zionism is.
But if the Jews control the world, if Israel has a big say in the world, listen, China and Russia have got their own say, but why is there so much media attention then towards Palestine and Israel? Listen, Palestine's a genocide, no matter what people say, no matter what side you pick. 80,000 deaths to 2,000.
200,000.
Yeah, do you know, like it's massive.
Yeah.
But why is it getting so much media coverage? Why would they let it happen then if they're controlling the media?
This is a really good question. So they control the media, but what they didn't expect, and this was a failure on their part, was they didn't expect TikTok and they didn't expect X. Those were the only two outlets that allowed, and even they've changed now, but just as an example, they are the only two outlets that allowed people to speak out for what's happening in Palestine. That's how I blew up even more. I had a large following, but now I'm like became one of the most viral accounts because I was debunking a lot of the lies that the Israelis were saying, whether it's about October 7th or various other things. And so they didn't expect that. And so what happened was in X, people we all blew up. On TikTok, people blew up speaking about it and didn't have control of those. The reason they didn't have control over TikTok was because it's controlled by the CCP, right? It's controlled by China through like a company in Singapore, right? ByteDance. And if you remember, there was calls in 2023 and 2022 to take control over TikTok. The US government was saying there's a problem that China controls TikTok. But then they put the legislation forward, but then it was just completely ignored. X was controlled by Elon Musk. He'd taken over it and he'd made it into a free speech platform. And he said, look, you could speak about anything, irrespective of what it is. And so what did they do? All of that information got proliferated. And when I spoke out against what happened, in terms of October 7th, I was the very first person to speak out for the Palestinians. That's the reason I blew up. But when I spoke out, I actually thought, look, this is a huge risk. Like if I speak out, I'm probably going to lose my social media account. There's going to be a lot of attacks against me because I knew they controlled the media. But I thought, look, let's do it. Like it's worth doing. It's worth sacrificing for the truth. And so I did it. But the opposite happened. The majority of the world was pro-Palestine. That actually ended up resulting in one blowing up. So what they did was they got Elon Musk and they made him, and got Elon Musk and they made him go on a tour to Auschwitz. They made him go to Israel and they basically made him spew the Israeli position. And then what you saw was X shift. The algorithm start shifting, the algorithm start changing. They redirected the algorithm. So now if you look at the algorithm on X, it's very much Zionist propaganda. All the accounts that are pushed are Israeli accounts, and the non-Israeli accounts are not pushed as much. TikTok was the same problem. As I mentioned earlier, Jonathan Greenblatt said, we've got a generation problem, we've got a TikTok problem. The war on TikTok is really important. What did they do? They put legislation in place that banned TikTok under the Biden administration. Because it doesn't matter if it's Biden or Trump. It doesn't matter if it's Starmer or Rishi Sunak. They control all of them. And so what happened was they got TikTok. They put a bill through to ban TikTok, the most used app in the world. And they put it in place to ban it. Trump then stops the ban, but with the idea that actually we're going to not ban it, but we're going to put it under American control. It was put under who the Americans are going to be put under control of. Jewish Zionist billionaires, Larry Ellison, David Horowitz, the same people I mentioned earlier in the interview. Those are the people who've taken control over TikTok. And so now, if you look at it, they've taken control of TikTok. They're able to control the algorithm. Already there's certain words you can't say now, which are pro-Palestine. So they realized they made the mistake and they made moves in these two outlets to take control over it. The rest of the outlets, if you look at the mainstream media, it's very much controlled by Zionists. If you look at the language they use, if you look at the information they propel, they'll say Israelis were killed, Palestinians died. They'll say, this many people died in Gaza, according to the Hamas ministry. So all of the statements they make is very much controlled. As an example, do you remember the lie they made about the beheaded babies on October 7th?
Yeah.
So I was one of the main people who debunked it, and I'm actually writing a book on it. But this is something that they pushed on something called I-24 News, which is an Israeli media outlet. So an Israeli media outlet, which is the mouthpiece of Netanyahu, pushed the lies about the beheaded babies. And it was pushed through their media. Now the question mark becomes, how did it get into American media? How did it get into British media? It was two people who work in the US media, who work in UK media, who worked for Business Insider. One was a Jewish American, one was a British Jew. Jewish American, one was a British Jew, who basically then pushed it into the media in the UK and the US. So it's always the same people who are pushing it, and they all control the same media. So what they'll try and do is use their power to diminish anyone who disagrees with them. So this is how they control it. So yeah, they control all the media outlets. They control all the mainstream media outlets. You saw basically Ellison now taking over CBS News. Just think about this. Barry Weiss, who is, again, someone who suspect many people think she's part of Israeli intelligence, but she's definitely a Zionist, right? Left wing. Her organization called the Free Press, it has less views than you. It has much less views than you. Do you know how much Larry Ellison gave her to take control over the direction of CBS News and to take over Free Press? $150 million. So if she's worth $150 million, you're worth $300 million. But really, her outlet's not worth that. That was, again, some kind of like money laundering operation, or an operation that was done in order to get Barry Weiss to control the direction of CBS News. So it is completely Zionist propaganda. And this is why they'll have on they'll put on Zionist propaganda. Dave Portnoy recently was put on where he complained about basically, anti-Semitism, and then he did a whole long show about anti-Semitism because it's about their control. And they'll talk about that, but they won't talk about, for example, attacks on Muslims. So what happened in the US was some kid, which I don't agree with, basically threw some pennies at Dave Portnoy, in front of Dave Portnoy, trying to say basically, like money. And he was like, look, this is a massive anti-Semitic attack. And then he was like, went to CBS News to speak about it. They said it's anti-Semitism. They got the boy arrested. But then recently, they did the exact same thing in Dearborn, Michigan, against Muslims, and nothing happened. And so this is kind of like how they control the media.
What about October 7th for you? Because I don't have a side of Palestine and Israel. I see innocent people being killed on both sides. Yes, there's more Palestinians than Israelis, but obviously Israel was that not British Palestine many years ago, 1940s or something. But what was your opinion and what you think happened on October 7th? My own opinion, I think I wouldn't say it was an inside job, but I think the reins had definitely been loosened for something that was planned, for something to happen. That's the way I see it, because how can you have one of the best intelligence in the world not knowing what was happening? I was told that they knew weeks in advance, but again, I don't know, but I feel as if it was allowed to happen for maybe, I don't know, but it was like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was many years ago, which created the Vietnam War. They created they said they shot at the boats, and then it allowed the Americans to get in and cause a war. But what's your opinion on October 7th?
So I'm agnostic whether it was an inside job or not. And the reason is I've researched a lot and both arguments are strong. So the argument for why it's an inside job is, as you said, there was intel a year before. There was also intel weeks before. The Egyptian military also gave intel, as well as Israeli intelligence within itself gave intel. Also, there was within the Israeli stock market, there was a massive short position. There's soldiers who come out and also claim that basically people were aware of it. So there is arguments for why it was an inside job. It is massively surveilled as well, but I don't think the Israeli IDF is as strong as Israeli intelligence. And so the IDF is extremely weak. And so there's a differentiation that should be made on there. Then on the other hand, why there's a possibility it isn't is the people who made these claims, a lot of the reporters are Zionist. And in addition to that, there was like a 6-hour gap. Now, was that because of incompetence or was that because of intentionality? There's a huge question mark about that. That being said, what happened on October the 7th is this. The Palestinian resistance, who had been oppressed for 75 years, who'd been kept in an open-air prison, who didn't have access to land, air, and sea, who had a calorie diet in terms of what was allowed into Gaza and what was not, decided that they wanted to basically break out of the open-air prison. And the reason they did it is because there was Palestinian hostages that are being held in Israeli prisons, over 11,000. A large proportion of them are women and children. And a large proportion of them also are people who've not even had a trial. So they basically are hostages. So the aim was this. The aim was to go into Israel and to get Israeli military personnel, take them back into Gaza and trade them for Palestinian hostages. So it was a military operation. It was never an attack on Jewish people. It was a specific military operation. Now, what happened on that day was there's a lot of things that went wrong. The first thing was that there was the Nova Festival. The Nova Festival was never meant to be there. The Nova Festival was only meant to be 24 hours. They had an extension which no one knew about to extend it for another 48 hours. And it ended up being there when it was never meant to be there. This is why when the resistance came there, they didn't expect it to be the case. And the aim was, if you look at what they targeted the military base and they targeted the kibbutz. Now, people say, oh, they targeted the kibbutz, but the kibbutz had military personnel in there. If you were doing an operation, that's what you would target. You would target where there's military people, right? There was non-military people there, but there's also military people there as well. And so the aim was to do an operation to take control of these areas, to take Israeli military personnel there. They didn't expect the Nova Festival to be there, and that's why they ended up taking a lot more hostages back than they ever planned to do so. Now, when they went into Israel, one of the things that happened was, first of all, there's 1,150 people who were killed. Of them, about 400 were military personnel, which leaves about 750. And my position is the vast majority of them were killed by Israel. And the reason and my evidence for this is this. If you look at the way Israel acted on that day, they lost their minds. First of all, they deployed Apache helicopters. And the Apache helicopters burned those cars and people to a crisp. Such was the extent of the kind of mental behavior in terms of burning it through Hellfire missiles, which can only be done by basically these Apache helicopters. You can't do it with RPGs or anything that the resistance had, whether it's the resistance or Hamas. They basically burn people to the crisp. For example, initially, if you remember, the numbers were a lot higher. They said, 1,500 people have been killed, 2,000 people have been killed. The reason they thought that was because they'd end up killing 200 Hamas people, burned them to the crisp, and couldn't identify whether they were Hamas or Israeli. So that was the level of attack they did from the air. So the attack they did from the air was so significant that I do believe they killed a large proportion of them. Galan, who is the head of the Israeli defense at that time, said that he deployed the Hannibal Directive. The Hannibal Directive is that Israel kills its own people, is mainly soldiers, but it's also their own people, in order for them not to be taken back to Israel, taken back to Gaza or wherever, in order to swap them for Israeli prisoners. So they deployed that where they kill their own people in order that they don't go back as hostages. Because previously what happened was when there was an exchange of Israeli prisoner for Palestinians, it was 1 to 1,027. And they thought, well, look, we don't want that. And they might have key information. Therefore, we're going to kill our people before they ever get there. So they killed their own people from the air. And they also killed their own people from the ground, because we have reports that they basically deployed short artillery fire into kibbutz. For example, there's a woman called Yasmin Porat. She is an Israeli. And she actually said, she went on radio and she said, look, when the firing was happening in the kibbutz, the Hamas members were basically shielding us. The Israelis were just shooting at us. And they were shooting us crazy. And this is in Kibbutz Berry, where over 180 people got killed. And by the way, Yasmin Porat now, they disappeared her, in the sense of she's not even allowed on media or anything like that. So what we know is the Israelis killed a lot of people from the air. They killed a lot of people on the ground. So my position is that the vast majority of people on that day were killed by Israel, or they were military personnel. Now the question mark becomes, did the resistance kill any people? Of course. I'm not someone who just lies, right? I've looked at all the videos. There is at least about 5 instances where it does look like that Hamas intentionally killed people. About 5 instances. Now, we don't know what happened before or what happened after. We don't know the people involved in there, whether they were military personnel or not. But they do look like that there was about 5 instances. Now, for those 5 people, my position is, of course, those people should be tried for the full extent of the law. Just like when we have British military personnel, as you know, Piers Morgan exposed it as various people who basically partook in, an American personnel who partake in certain actions that weren't accepted or basically directed by the army. Similarly, these people who've done that, they should definitely be held for trial. But this idea that basically there is some instances of certain people partaking in certain actions and now you need to kill everyone is just completely demonic. So that's my position. And on top of that as well, the other claim was about mass rape. There is zero evidence that there was any mass rape. There's zero evidence that there's any rape whatsoever. The UN went in to Israel in order to do a extensive amount of research and to do a study. And what they found is that basically they went in and they said, we didn't look at any of the videos because Israel didn't allow it. We didn't look at any of the picture evidence because Israel didn't allow it. We didn't look at any of the footage because Israel didn't allow it. We didn't look at, we weren't allowed to speak to witnesses because Israel didn't allow it. And so they said all of these things. They said that basically when they looked at the bodies, there was no physical evidence of rape. There was no physical evidence that any of these things had happened. And their whole bit, so I agree with the assessment because they've done the research. They've said we weren't allowed to do any of these things. There's no physical evidence in terms of the bodies. When you look at, for example, the genitalia, they said there was never targeting of genitalia. Whenever someone was shot there, they were always shot in the body as well. So there wasn't specific targeting. The whole basis of why she came to that conclusion in the UN, first of all, she was friends with Qadari, who had basically someone who was part of the Israeli foreign ministry, who was friends with the UN, who basically got them to do the investigation. So again, there's this kind of biases that occurs. And I agree with the study. I just don't agree with the conclusion, because the conclusion isn't based on the study, because the study says there's no evidence. The study says there's no physical evidence. The study says that only the position of the bodies gives her the indication that there was rape. But in reality, she says in the same report that those positions of those bodies were moved by the Israelis. And so when you take all that into consideration as October 7th, all of it was lies. The reason they lied about it was because they wanted to manufacture consent. If you tell everybody that people have been raped, if you tell women have been abused, if you say that there's been murder of Jews, then this manufactures consent. And this is why immediately after it, they were like, glass Gaza, turn it into a parking lot. Many of the big Israeli pundits, all of them said that. And the reason they said it is because they wanted to manufacture all of this consent in order to take over Gaza. Because the Israeli position is this: they never want Gaza, in terms of they want Gaza, but they don't want the people within Gaza. So if you look at 1967, after they won the war, they had a choice. They could have taken control of Gaza and made it part of Israel, or they could have made it a separate state. They didn't want to make it a separate state because they didn't want the Palestinians to have a state. They didn't want to incorporate it as part of Israel, because then it means that Jewish people are the minority, because there's more non-Jews who live there than Jews.
What do you think of Hamas?
So my position on Hamas is that they're a terrorist organization. So according to UK law, and this is something we're going to speak about in terms of free speech, obviously you can't support someone like Hamas, right? That being said, in terms of what they are a resistance group. And if there wasn't Hamas who was resistant, and Hamas aren't the only resistance group, you have other resistance groups like the PIJ and various other Marxist resistance groups. If you didn't have Hamas resisting, other people would be resisting as well, because the whole idea is to resist against Israeli oppression. For example, you look at the West Bank. The West Bank don't have resistance. The PA is in control of the West Bank, and what are we seeing there? People get killed in the West Bank. People get arrested in the West Bank. The illegal settlements are increasing in the West Bank. Palestinians are losing their land without ever resisting. And so, irrespective of whether you want to call them Hamas or whatever, somebody will always resist. Now, the question mark becomes Hamas themselves specifically. Is their goal to eradicate Jews? It's not. And the basis and my argument for why that is because if you look at the Hamas charter, whether it's the 1988 charter, if you look at the Hamas charter, whether it's the 2017 charter, or you even look at the booklet that they released after October the 7th, they quite clearly say this. They say that they want to eradicate Israel because Israel is an occupying force. Their war is with the political entity that is Israel. But they actually say in the charter, if we were to basically eradicate Israel, or we were to take out Israel, we would have a land which has freedom, where they mention this, Muslims, Christians, and Jews can live in harmony, that we will give them protection, and they'll be able to practice the way they want.
What do you think of the IRA?
So same. I think the IRA, in terms of what happened in that regard, I do think that this was done, in terms of the separation of Ireland, was done intentionally.
Yeah, no, that's why I'm asking, because it's another man's freedom fighters, another man's terrorists.
Exactly.
For me, like I say, war is bad, but I understand, like I spoke earlier, people come to Scotland and I'm there to protect it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to go and fight.
Exactly.
If people are going to try and hurt our children, then I'm going to try and protect it. But same as IRA, like when Britain were trying to take over, and would you say they were like resisting as well? And
so again, like I didn't agree with the IRA in terms of certain actions they did, but in terms of this idea that they want to resist because they want Ireland to be controlled by the Irish, that is something that you understand logically. It's their land, it's for their people. And this is why I've always said that, even in the UK, when you made the argument about white people and how it is part of what culture is, I agree with you. This is what makes Britain Britain. This is what makes Ireland Ireland. And so, yeah, I do think that resisting any kind of occupation, and remember the Irish people, they never ever oppressed anyone. When Ireland went around to different countries and basically occupied or taken control or oppressed people, it's never happened. They've been oppressed for many, many times in many different instances in history. So yeah, I'm for, in terms of, and I understand the logical reason behind why people are resisting. And now again, I'm trying to be careful in my terminology because unfortunately we don't have free speech in the UK. And like any of these statements that are made, we could get arrested for. And therefore we have to be like very precise. And this is why I always say to my followers, try and be precise, because when you look at the free speech in the UK, it's completely been eradicated. And I know people in the far right feel like it's a target to them. And I do think there is some targeting on them for sure. But I think largely speaking, a lot of the arrests that are happening, a lot of the censorship that's happening is against anyone who speaks out against Israel or speaks out against Zionism. People are being arrested in their thousands.
What do you think of two-tier policing?
What do you mean by two tiers?
You will see certain people getting imprisoned and other people not. Like if you look at the protests and say Epping, you had the protesters, but when you're protesting, I believe everybody has the right to protest. You know, you've got to have the right to protest. When there's violence in it, I think, what the fuck are you doing? When people are looting and stealing things and bombing cars, like, that's just what it's not. You're not going to get change through that. But I don't believe people should be going to prison for words on social media.
I agree.
You know, I don't get that. But when we talk about when the Muslims had the baseball bats and all that other stuff, they weren't touched. So people talk about two-tier policing, where Muslims can be left alone, but the whites are getting done for protesting and shouting and words on social media. So I think, I don't really see it. I can only judge from the clips. I've never been to these protest sort of things, and I don't really understand that. I'm not really there. Other people do it, but I just don't want to get involved, because I feel as if when you do that, you're choosing a side. You know?
So it's going to sound like I'm biased, but I'm
you know,
not,
sometimes
right?
you might be as well, though, because of your beliefs.
Yeah, maybe. But let's look at protest, and then let's look at free speech and censorship. And by the way, I'm literally believing free speech. Like, I love the US system, where they have free speech, and I was speaking out against how that's being attacked by the Zionists in the US to stop free speech in the United States of America. But look, we've had, and I mentioned this earlier, we've had 3 big instances of riots, right? Race or religious-based riots. We had the 2001 Tottenham riots, we had the 2011 Bradford riots, and then we had the Southport riots, right? The data clearly shows that when it came to the Bradford riots, the sentences people got in terms of time length, they were the most harshest. So actually, the Pakistani Muslim community from the Bradford riots got the most harshest sentencing based on the riots. And by the way, I agree that when riots, and the reason they do it is this, and not that I agree, I think this is a question mark they need to have, but the reason they're very harsh on riots is because you can't have civil disorder. Because if people think that rioting is going to have a minimal sentence, everyone's going to start destroying buildings and places. This is why the argument they made for why people from the Bradford riots were given such harsh sentences. Like, people did some even...
there was buses and that on fire, though.
Exactly.
Like, there was crazy shit. No, I didn't know that. Okay, people look on that, because like you say with the two-tier policing, I see the incident at the airport.
Yeah.
When the boys battered the fucking women and battered the police, and then there was nothing of it. But like I say, I think people, like you says, jump on that as if it is a problem. But I think the system here is actually not too bad when it comes to sentences. I think a lot of sentences are lenient when it comes to paedophilia and stuff. I think they should be life sentence. I think it should be harsher. But for other sentences, I don't think people should get in 3 years for a Facebook post. But if you're telling people to go and fucking burn down a house or kill immigrants, but you should be getting jailed. There's no difference for conspiracy to murder from sending a text message, from posting online. So I think you can't have vigilantes. You can't, like you say, you can't have the whole world. It's important because, like I said earlier, the power of the people.
So what was your thoughts about Lucy Connolly?
I don't think she should have went to prison.
Okay.
A woman, you know, I don't agree with what she says, but she deleted that. Right. You know, I don't think she's...
How long after did she delete it?
I don't know.
But the reason I asked that is because you said you shouldn't incite, but she was inciting.
But what did she say?
From the top of my mind, she said something like...
they can something in, like, for all I care.
Yeah, burn down the hut. Burn down the hut.
People can burn down the for all I care. I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
no matter
I'm not agree with it, but do you think it was inciting? I think we both don't agree with it, because I think both wasn't like peaceful guys.
I think it's just that you've got to understand, when you're looking at social media and you're seeing these videos, you're going to hate whoever it is you're looking at. But the brain is a program, so we're being programmed to believe the world is a mess. That's why I need to step back from social media and actually be a free thinker and actually act on what I speak instead of just looking at that. Because if I see 10 Muslims harming a child, I'm going to hate that. But if I see white men doing it, I'm going to hate them. So I need to be careful, because where your focus goes, your energy flows.
Yeah.
So I need to be careful that I'm not being brainwashed, you know, and hating on demographics of certain religions, because that's not what I'm about. I know people from all walks and who I respect. So I need to be that guy who sits on the fence and listen, have your opinion. I'm not here to fucking not ruffle feathers. I'm not here to have a voice. I'm here to have a voice and go, I don't really agree with that. The Lucy Connolly thing, she shouldn't have said that. Should she have got 2 years? 3 years, whatever it was? I think they tried to make an example. Like you says, people can't just be shouting that shit because people's emotions are heightened when they see these videos. But I just think social media plays a massive part in all, and I think anybody inciting violence, I feel as if you need to be punished.
So I'm going to mention about the two-tier system in a second, but just on the Lucy Connolly, the reason I brought that up is because it's a really important test case. Because if you believe in free speech, right, it should be allowed.
But what's the difference? But free speech and hate speech is different for me, because I believe in free speech.
Hate speech is free speech.
Yeah, but I see, I think free speech and having an opinion, but I think when it comes to harming someone, I don't see it as free speech. If I'm going to murder him, I don't think that's free speech. I think that's dangerous territories, you know.
We'll come to that in a second. So, for example, would you think that if somebody called someone like a Jew, a Paki, a cracker, do you think that should be allowed in free speech?
I don't think so, no.
So that's the difference between your opinion and the First Amendment.
Yeah.
The First Amendment allows hate speech.
Everything, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's an important, and I'll explain to you the reason why, because you can then say, oh, all of this is hate speech, and when you did that, it became liberal. You know what the liberals did, where it became war.
All the Americans are saying the N-word now.
Exactly.
They're doing videos and saying the N-word.
Exactly.
Talking about the First Amendment, but I don't.
And I don't do that.
Yeah.
I try and be careful about hurting anyone's feelings.
And
but they
you're
should
big on free speech.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's the free speech and hate speech. It's totally different from making threats. You know, like, have an opinion, have your opinion on it, and if you want to say any word, by all means, say it. But I just think we're in a world where we can't let everything just go by and saying everything's free. But then again, am I contradicting myself because I'm for free speech? But then should you be hating on other people because I don't want to be hating on anybody?
Exactly.
You know, so it's like a contradiction. So as a sticky one, I understand what you're saying,
like,
as well.
A lot of my friends, because I'm in America a lot, like Myron and all these guys, they'll use the N-word all the time, right? And I'm always careful I don't use it.
Yeah.
And the reason is because, not that I'm scared of the word, but I just don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I don't care if it's like black people or even white people. Like, I'll never use the word, like, you know, this
honky,
all that kind of stuff. And similarly, all the kind of stuff. Just try and be careful on people, because now everyone even white people say, oh, anti-white racism, anti-Christian. So everyone has this kind of idea that people are being racist to them. So I try and like respect people. That being said, I don't want to make it illegal, because we've seen the slippery slope it gets into, and I just believe that the slippery slope is not good. We need to be in this situation where me and you are talking. We've got slightly different opinions. We've got to agree on certain things. And that's the best way to understand each other and understand ideas. And I think once you get into this avenue and you start censoring people, this is the big problem that's going to occur. Now, we've spoken about hate speech and free speech. And now the second point about is incitement. And that's why I bring Lucy Connolly in, because Lucy Connolly's case is almost very interesting when it comes to that aspect. Because one, I think there's a very strong argument to say that what she said was inciting. And then the question mark becomes, where's the line? Because I know she got emotional, but I believe she's the wife of a politician, if I'm right. Mm-hmm. And she is someone who said, burn the hotels for all I care. And people were burning hotels, right? Mm-hmm. There's a strong argument to make that was incitement for violence. Now, the question mark becomes, does one agree that incitement for violence should be something that is imprisonment?
For free speech as well?
Yeah.
I think if you're inciting violence and telling people to do stuff, then you should be in prison.
Okay. But then what about when it's indirect? So as an example, people make this argument. And again, I'm not trying to bring Tommy in, but I think it's a very good argument from a logical, conversational perspective. So he was like, I can't remember the exact word, but he was like, everyone get up. It's take our country. And you remember, he was also exacerbating it.
Yeah.
Would that fall into that category, or do you think there's too much of a jump?
No, I think if you're inciting violence and telling people to go places and sending addresses, then you've got to be done for inciting violence. I think running with your emotions on social media and looking at certain videos, it can heighten your emotion. So I think if someone deletes something and go, listen, I apologise, okay, you made a mistake. But I think if people are talking about killing people, killing different races, killing illegal immigrants, then no, you've got to be punished, no matter what it is.
Yeah.
Like, I believe, like, no matter what colour you are, if you're telling people to go to fucking mosques and chapels and whatever it is, then you've got to be punished, because where does it end?
Exactly.
You know, there's got to be some boundaries.
Yeah.
There's got to be some boundaries on free speech. You can't just be texting people saying, oh, I'm going to kill you and your fucking family, but yeah, I'm allowed free speech.
Yeah.
No, come on, you've got to have common sense. Like, have a discussion.
But that's not part of free speech, right? So in the US, in terms of the First Amendment, incitement to violence isn't free speech. But the question mark when incitement comes, what falls into that? So anyway, I think we're in agreement about this, but I just thought it's worth having a conversation. And the reason, in terms of, sorry, you can say about...
No, sorry, no, I was just going to, you go finish up first.
So I was going to mention about the 2 tiers, so it was a different topic, so...
Yeah, no, the 2 tier is interesting, but social media would make you think it's 2 tier.
Yeah, so I think it's 2 tier, but against Muslims.
Yeah.
And against pro-Palestine, and I'll explain to you why. So I gave the
Do you think the algorithm, though, could be playing me and you?
Oh, of course. There's no doubt about that. The algorithm is playing. The algorithm is definitely pushing these riots. I'm just saying it based on the data. So based on the data, because I don't look at the algorithm, I never listen to what people say, because I just find I don't find most people to be smart.
So if I was to go on social media and look at two-tier policing, I would think Muslims get away with more than the white man.
That's because Elon Musk's pushing it. Elon Musk controls social media, and X. Now, I give the example of the 2011 riots. Pakistani Muslims were given the most harshest sentence. The second harshest was 2001, and the least harshest was last year, right? So what that shows is actually last year was the least harshest compared to those three in terms of riots. In terms of people who got prosecuted, I haven't looked into this in detail, but from my understanding, there was Muslims who got prosecuted for that. In terms of how long they got, I know, because I'm from Middlesbrough, I know quite a few lads who basically got sent down for basically, again, they believe it's defense, whatever it is, in terms of what happened in those riots. So when you look at that, that's one thing. The second thing is this, in terms of, because I researched grooming a lot, the data quite clearly shows that up until 2021, when we had the data, basically, when it came to people being arrested, minorities and actually Muslims were arrested a lot more than anybody else. They were sent to trial a lot more, and they were found guilty less because it was incorrect arrest. But when they were found guilty, they were given longer sentences. So they arrested more, they are sent to court more, but then they found not guilty because they presumably believe they're innocent. But then when they are found guilty, they're given longer sentences. And then if you look at the attack on free speech, I don't think anyone should be arrested. I believe there was a comic who came into the UK and he was arrested as well. I believe he's like a right-wing guy or whatever. I don't agree with any of that. But let's be clear on this. In the UK, it's anyone who's pro-Palestine who's been arrested a lot more. We had thousands of people from the pro-Palestinian protests who were arrested. Grandmas, granddads, disabled people, elderly people.
But then Tommy has been in prison as well, and he's been arrested multiple times.
I agree. But when Tommy was arrested, first of all, I was happy that he got found not guilty on the last one, because them taking his phone away, he's a journalist. And to be honest, we all don't want those rights taken away. And whenever they attack people who we disagree with, they use that powers against us. So I was very happy that he was found not guilty, because it benefits all of us, because that'll be more power and control they have over us. But in terms of Tommy being incarcerated, I mean, that made sense. And I'll explain to you why. Because he lost his civil legal case against that Syrian boy. Went to the court of law. He provided his evidence. They provided their evidence. He lost. There was a court order to say you're not allowed to release this information or this documentary. He then basically released it. Now, you can either hold the position that, look, no one in the UK should follow court orders, and that's fine, but then we've got no legal system, we've got no justice. Or if someone does break it, then there has to be some kind of reprimand for it. So quite clearly, he broke the court order, and therefore he got reprimanded for it. But if you look at it, in my view, Tommy Robinson in the Southpaw riots definitely incited those a lot, yet nothing happened to him. If you look at a lot of his tweets, they're a lot harsher than anybody else, and yet he never ever gets arrested. We have people like Richard Medhurst, we have people like Sarah Wilkinson, we have people like Asa Winstanley, all of them pro-Palestine, not done anything other than being pro-Palestine, and all of them been arrested, all of them got court dates. We have basically a doctor, Dr. Rahma, who basically, and many other doctors who have had their medical license taken away for being pro-Palestine. The medical institute has now basically taken their license away, and Wes Streeting is working with the Jewish lawyers and the lawyers for Israel or the Zionist lobby, in order to basically censor these people. Just think about it. You're a medical doctor. The NHS is on the grounds, it's basically struggling, and you're basically taking doctors away because they're pro-Palestine. And so we're seeing mass censorship occur, but we believe it's quite clearly on that side as opposed to anything else. There is far-right people doing it, because I'm not one of these people who are like, oh, it's just happening to our side, but it's disproportionately happening to these guys.
Right, Israel. Why is Israel so big? Why is all these presidents and prime ministers going and touching this wall? Why have they got so much control? Are we paranoid? Like why is it seem as if Israel are calling the shots?
They are calling the shots, and they do it through various methods. Some of it's financial, some of it's career progression, some of it's based on Epstein, Epstein and his multinational blackmailing ring, which had many of the prime ministers, people like Prince Andrew, people like Bill Clinton. He was friends with Donald Trump. Even now, they're not releasing the Epstein files, even though the vast majority of Americans want it. People who are Trump supporters are turning on Trump because he isn't releasing the Epstein files.
Yeah, Epstein was Mossad.
He was. He worked for Israeli intelligence, and also, he worked for Israeli intelligence. And so, when you look at all of these things, the reason they do it is because just think about a politician in the US or in the UK. So either they'll be paid by AIPAC or Zionist lobbies, so they're going to be guaranteed their seat. And it's not just through AIPAC, it'll be like through the Adelsons. If you disagree with them, what do? Look what happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene. She stepped down. You look at Thomas Massey, and they're literally saying they're going to spend tens of millions of dollars to make sure he doesn't win his seat in the mid-elections of 2026. So when you go against them, you lose your seat. If you stand with them, A, you get paid, but B, also when you don't get paid, you get career progression. So basically what happens is if I'm a young congressman, or I'm a young politician and I want to become a congressman, I know what I need to do, what moves I need to do to get into the positions of power. And the moves I need to do is to make sure I don't speak out against them. I need to agree with them. And so what they've done is they've taken control of the political system. They've taken over the media. I've spoken depth about all the different media outlets that they've taken control over. They take over the NGOs and the lobby groups. They've taken over everything in order for people to basically subservient. Priti Patel can literally, in the UK, when she was Home Secretary, she redirected money that was meant to go to the British military to the IDF. It was on the news for a little bit, and then nothing happened to her. She came back again. So our politicians are completely occupied and completely controlled, and they do everything for the interest of Israel and the Zionists, and it harms our people. For example, we're struggling. I travel a lot. I go to all of the countries in the world. And when I come back, 15 years ago when I used to travel, or 10 years ago when I used to travel, I'd come back and say, oh man, there's nothing like UK. UK is the best. Now when I come back, I'm like, flip. Every country is better than us. Like it's one of the worst places to come to. And the reason is because of the harm that they've done to our society and the harm that they've done to our people. They've caused this friction. They've caused poverty. They've caused even Brexit. They pushed Brexit, they pushed all of these things. And for example, in the 12-day war between Israel and Iran would have destroyed Israel if it wasn't for the United States and the UK. How much money did we spend in order to help Israel during them 12 days? Billions of dollars. And so when it comes down to that, when money is being spent for this foreign nation and we're completely occupied and people are talking about a Muslim invasion when we've got a Jewish prime minister, it's completely controlled. You look at COVID measures. If you look at the people who are in charge of Pfizer, they're all Jewish Zionists. If you look at the COVID restrictions that were put in place, as you rightly said, it was a test case because the aim, as you said, is digital ID, is to control. But who's been given the contracts? So if you look at the UK and the US, during COVID, a large number of our contracts were given to Palantir. Palantir is Peter Thiel. Palantir is Alex Karp, who are Jewish Zionists who deployed their weapons in Palestine, or the technology in Palestine. They also do mass surveillance, and they are behind a lot of these things. You mentioned Tony Blair. You're right, Tony Blair's son is part of the digital ID, but the mass surveillance that they're going to basically put in place for us, those major contracts in the UK and the US is being given to Palantir. So they have contracts in terms of our medical records. They have control over all of those. NHS, they have control over the defense contracts. They have control over surveillance contracts in the UK. And they have, even in the UK, they have contracts over undisclosed contracts as well. So contracts that we can't even look at. We don't know how deep this goes, but they want mass surveillance. And I actually think that's the reason why they've deployed someone like Tommy Robinson to cause these riots, because the world started uniting against Zionists. If you look at it, the whole world was uniting against it too. And they did a study and they said, how do we get people to go off the anti-Zionist bandwagon, to get against, everyone, if it's Muslims, Christians, everyone was against it, right? And they said, and they did a research, and what they found was, it was a study and it was a poll. And what they found is the best way to do it is to create anti-Islam propaganda, and you can then get these guys to fight again. And so then that's what they've been deploying. And I believe that the reason for people like Tommy Robinson to be deployed is to cause these riots, to cause this destruction, and then both sides will agree to it. They'll tell the left, look, we need to stop these far-right hooligans. they're going to try and smash you up. They're going to smash your windows. We need to have surveillance. Do you want these guys to be watched? And they'll be like, yeah, we want our safety. And to the right, they'll say the same thing. We want these Muslim terrorists to be stopped. Do you want surveillance? And they'll say, yeah. And so it's a way of creating mass surveillance. That's their objective. And so you look at these contracts that have been put in place in these countries, it is for that. And then our Labour government has been put in place in order to create these tensions. Because isn't it, that Labour in the UK, Corbyn was in charge of Labour in the UK, right? Mm-hmm. He was against that. He was against Israel. He was against the Palestinian oppression. They made false accusations of anti-Semitism against him. They made him stand down. Keir Starmer was the guy. They put him in power. They put Keir Starmer in power. Then they also had Nigel Farage, who also is a Zionist, who also propagates them. So they're basically playing both sides. And for example, other elements are involved as well, like Russia, I do think, support Farage. For example, Alexander Dugin, who is the kind of the philosophical position of the Russian government, supports Tommy Robinson and supports Farage. So that kind of tells you how it's the Russian benefit to cause this kind of civil war as well. And so they support them. And so what you saw with the Labour was, with Labour, they won the vast majority of seats, so they can do anything and no one can speak out, like no one can stand up against them. But how did they do it? How did they get the majority? They only got 40% of the vote. Mm-hmm. They got it by Farage splitting the Conservative vote.
But nearly 50% of people didn't even vote. For me, I just think they're all part of the same bird,
Exactly.
I don't really see it. What do you actually think happened to Charlie Kirk? Because Charlie Kirk was very pro-Israel.
Yeah.
And then over the last couple of weeks before his death, he started speaking out against them. He says he was going to start exposing certain things. But what do you actually think is behind his death?
Yeah, so I have a controversial opinion on this that both sides don't like it, so I'll give that answer. But just before that, in terms of the Peter Thiel thing and Palantir, so Peter Thiel, who's head of mass surveillance and Palantir, he controls the US president. Yeah. So JD Vance is his guy that he put in as vice president. He made him senator for 2 years, and then he put him as vice president, and then he's going to be the new leader of the US government. And where do you think that goes in terms of Palantir and mass surveillance? Coming back to Charlie Kirk, I know it's a bit controversial. So I do think that Israel were involved, but in terms of how they were involved, I don't agree with. So you've got basically the Candace Owens kind of position, and then you've got the kind of...
I went off her as well.
Why?
I don't know. I just think they're all full of shit.
Really?
Yeah, I look at Charlie Kirk's wife. Listen, everybody deals with trauma differently, but there was a lot of stuff coming out about Romania and human trafficking, and I don't know. I just feel as if everybody who's got a certain platform that big, I think they're all controlled. And I listen to Candace, and she's supposed to be a Christian woman. Like, why are you not just looking after your kids? Why are you not with your husband? Why are you online pretending that you're fighting for people? I think it's just all about views and money, if I'm completely honest. And listen, I could be wrong, and if I'm wrong, I will apologise. But I don't know. I used to like her, but I just think now she's full of shit. I think they're all the same. I think they all work together.
I like Candace, even though I disagree with her. And I mean, if she's doing it for money, she's doing a really bad job, because she was on a really good contract with the Daily Wire. She was making a lot of money. She left that and she was demonetized on YouTube. And so her sole income is through sponsors and, people who give donations, super chats. That's not a huge amount of money.
Patreon.
And Patreon, yeah. And her website. But the point is, as you know, YouTube ads makes a lot of money. And if you're working for like Daily Wire, you're going to be making a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
So she hasn't lost money.
But I could be wrong, but just the way I'm seeing it now, I just look and think, I don't know, man, it just doesn't sit right with me with these people. And the Americans are different. The UK, I would say the Americans are more political than the UK. Like, there's proper left and right wing over there.
Yeah.
Like, it's got it here, but it's very minimum, because not everybody cares here.
True.
Like, not everybody votes. When they play the national anthem and there's not tears, Americans are patriotic. Definitely. They cry and they love their country, and I love the Americans.
Yeah.
The one thing about the Americans, they help you out. There's no badness about them. Like, they'll give you phone numbers. Hey, I know him. Here in the UK, nobody works with each other.
True.
Everybody's kind of backstabbers here.
I agree.
I kind of doing it myself now. I've took a few steps back, and I just want to interview people. I just want to be open-minded to everything and not completely lost. But for the Candace thing, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I used to listen to her and watch her, but just after Charlie Kirk get killed, I don't know. Everybody's moving shifty.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I know what you're saying. And with Candace Owens, so I don't agree with a lot of her positions. That being said, What do I think happened but at the same time, I don't agree with the Israeli position as well on it. So I do believe that Israel was involved. And I do believe that the Mormons were involved as well. And I believe that they were working together to do it. And the thing with Candace Owens is she is getting some of the information from Mormons. So I think some of it is kind of like misguided. And so what do I mean by that? Because the Mormons are very much pro-Israel. And in Utah, there's a lot of Mormons. If you look at many of the people who are high up in TPUSA, they're Mormons. I'm not saying they were involved or not. And then if you look at, for example, that area, for example, George Zinn, the guy
who's that?
He's the guy who misdirected everybody when the shooting happened. He was Mormon. Tyler Robinson, the shooter, was Mormon. Lance Briggs, the boyfriend/girlfriend of the shooter, was Mormon. And Mormons have very strong links to intelligence, both the FBI, CIA, and Mossad. In addition to that, when I look at what happened with Charlie Kirk, I do think he was very much pro-Israel, and I think he supported them more than anyone else. And I think he was not changing. I think that what happened was in the US, they were seeing that the vast majority of the people who are young, were moving to Nick Fuentes, and they were losing their position. And so therefore he was kind of trying to move his position a lot more because he was just losing the battle with the youth. Everyone was moving away from him. So I don't think he was ever being anti-Israel. I don't hold that position. But what I do think that he was against the war in Iran. And I think that was a problem for the Israelis, because somebody who is against the war with Iran is against the existence of Israel. Because without America and the UK and Europe and the Arab countries, but really America, because all these countries just follow the US, right? Without them, Iran defeats Israel in the 12-day war. You saw the amount of damage they did to Israel. And so if you don't have America, Israel ceases to exist. Israel can't defeat Iran without the United States of America. And so therefore they need them. Charlie Kirk privately went to Donald Trump and told him not to go to war with Iran. Or Donald Trump was very much thinking about it. And so him and Tucker Carlson were probably the sole voices within the Trump administration who stopped the war in Iran from happening. And that meant that Israel always has the threat of Iran. Now, I'm a big believer that they're going to fight with Iran sooner or later again. And they can't have that voice speaking out against Iran. And so I do think that the Israel were involved. I believe that what they did was either Tyler Robinson is an actual agent, or he was someone who was manipulated by the Israelis through Antifa or Trans-Tifa, because remember, even Trans-Tifa goes all the way back to Israel through Ehud Barak and various other organizations. And either he got manipulated by them, but I think more likely is that I think some of these people were actual agents.
What do you think of digital ID?
Completely against it. I think this is, again, something that is being done by the Zionist lobby in order to control us, in order to see what we're doing, in order to take away our rights, to take away our freedoms. And again, digital ID is being done by Tony Blair and his son, but the Tony Blair Institute, you know who's the biggest funder of Tony Blair Institute?
No.
Same names again, Larry Ellison. So Larry Ellison, the same guy who controls TikTok now, the same guy who controls CBS News, the same guy who's about to take over CNN, Paramount, and all these different organizations, is also the biggest controller of the Tony Blair Institute, who is also taking control over Gaza, and is, in addition to that, connected to the Tony Blair Institute in terms of the digital IDs. So why is it always going back to the same people?
What do you think of Nick Fuentes? He's went viral.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's a friend of mine. And funny enough, I went to AFPAC 4, which was basically an event that he holds on a yearly basis or semi-yearly basis. I was the only British guy who was invited. And obviously I'm Asian as well. So look, with the right in the US, what makes it unique to the right in the UK is the UK right is completely Zionist controlled. As you've seen with the war in the right in the US, it's been split down the middle. You have the Zionist Israeli controlled right, which is demonstrated by people like Ben Shapiro, Mark Levin, and various others, Dave Rubin and all the rest of them, is one side, Ted Cruz. And then the other side is people like Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, and Tucker Carlson. And there's been a great split. Now, the reason why someone like him has become popular is very simple. He speaks about Israel. He speaks about the Zionist control of the United States of America, and they have a problem with that. He's gone viral for that reason. And now what you've seen is this massive, in these last 2 weeks, discrediting campaign because he's become huge. When I met him in 2023, I met the guy and I said, listen, this guy's smart. Obviously, I respect people who are smart. And I was like, this guy's definitely going to become, sooner or later, I do believe he's going to become the US president at some point. That's the level of power that he's wielding in terms of how the level of how his popularity is increasing. And that being said, the reason they've attacked him, just think about it, it's based on like jokes that he's making. It's based on jokes that he's making in the past. And if you know anything about like Gen Z, they'll joke around, they'll make racist jokes, they'll make they don't see it as bad. And this is kind of like a generational problem where he's able to speak to the youth, where me and you probably wouldn't, because we probably wouldn't make those type of jokes. And what they're seeing is that his following has increased a lot, and so they're trying to basically minimize him and basically attack him. But in reality, like, what are they trying to attack him about? They call him an anti-Semite, but what has he said that is anti-Semitic? He's against the Jewish control of the United States of America. In his position, I think it's a Zionist issue. He thinks it's a Jewish issue. We disagree with that. But why is his position so bad? Why is it someone like Piers Morgan, who's afraid to have someone like us on, is willing to basically call him an anti-Semite? He's saying that when I have him on his show, I'm going to attack him, but doesn't attack people like Douglas Murray, like Ben Shapiro, like Gad Saad, who come on his show and say that Muslims are a problem, that Islam's a problem. They're fine to go on Piers Morgan's show, but for some reason, someone like Nick Fuentes is considered like a Holocaust denier, somebody who attacks Jews. And what this really is that they want to control the conversation. They're afraid that this guy speaks to the youth, speaks to the fact that they're poor, which is what's happening. There's affordability issues, and speaks to the fact that a lot of those issues are happening because of, according to him, Jews, according to us, Zionists, but they're taking control of the United States of America. They're no longer a sovereign country. If you say you're a patriot, and this is why I've got a problem with the far right in the UK, when you say you're a patriot, being a patriot means having a sovereign nation. That's the number one thing. You control your own country. If you don't control your own country, how are you a patriot? And so any of these people who don't speak about the people who are really controlling the US government or the UK government, there's huge question marks about them. But someone like Nick Fuentes is speaking clearly about the fact that there's Zionist control, and that's the reason they're going after him. If you look at it, his popularity is increased. You look at his analysis is very academic. He's a streamer, and yet they took away his... They've tried everything in their power to cancel him. Ben Shapiro tried to cancel him, and Daily Wire tried to cancel him in 2016. He had his payment process taken away. He was cancelled from all social medias. I know, because in 2023, I was one of the biggest advocates to try and get him back on X. And then through my advocacy and the advocacy of many others, he was then brought back on X. And since he's been back on X, and since he's been allowed a platform on Rumble, he's had a huge following. He gets 50,000 live viewers on Rumble. Not YouTube, Rumble, because he's not allowed back on YouTube. And the question mark becomes, why is it Nick Fuentes was banned on YouTube, but Ben Shapiro wasn't? Why was Nick Fuentes banned on YouTube, but Jordan Peterson was? If it's really the left that's cancelling, why they not cancel someone like Jordan Peterson? Was he not talking about trans? Was he not talking about pronouns? Would they not have been triggered more by him than anybody else? Yeah, he wasn't cancelled, but Nick Fuentes was. And that'll show you who really controls things. In terms of Nick Fuentes, the reason they're going after him is quite simple. He's speaking about the Zionist lobby. He's speaking about the fact that they are controlling things. And like the jokes, like are not, what issue has he said, my question mark to people is, that is not being said by anybody else. And what I mean by that is, I mentioned Gad Saad, but Piers Morgan has him on and never pushes back on him. Yeah, Douglas Murray, Piers Morgan has him on, but never pushes back on him. Ben Shapiro literally said Arabs should be in sewers. Arabs destroy, Jews build. Gad Saad said there's not a problem with extremism in Islam. There's not a problem with Islamism. There's a problem with Muslims and Islam. Did Piers Morgan bring him up and call him a disgusting Islamophobe? Did he say that he's horrible, I'm going to push back on him? No, he didn't. He literally gave him an open platform and give him the platform to say what he wants.
What do you think of the New York mayor?
Zoran Mamdani. So I went through.
It actually looks. It looks okay, but the people who are against Muslims, we have to be honest, they've had a complete meltdown. They're saying the UK is going to be like the UK and this and that. But I've watched his videos. He seems a good guy. Like, he actually seems okay. I don't give a fuck about politics, but I do get caught up in that scene.
Yeah.
When I say that, I still take interest. But I don't know too much about him, but people have really had a meltdown. People are saying we need to leave New York. It's going to be bad. I hope it proves everybody wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't know him. So what do you think?
Yeah. I'm massively involved in US politics. So, like I said, I'm like Piers Morgan, but in terms of involved in US politics, vast majority of my audience is actually American. And that's why I go live like, 7 p.m. Eastern, which is midnight here. But in terms of Zohar Mamdani, I went through a few shifts with him. So initially, if you remember, he was on the podium in terms of the Republican primary. In terms of the Democrat primary, because the primary is who's going to be the candidate to stand for the Democrats in New York. So he was in the Democrat primary, and the presenter asked about where are you going to travel? And all the candidates, despite being the New York mayor, was like, we're going to go to Israel. Next one, we're going to go to Israel. We're going to go to Israel. Next one's like, my heart and my mind bleeds for Israel. And he was like, I'm not going to go to Israel. I'm going to stay in New York. And that blew up. And everyone was like, wow, this guy's putting Americans first. He's putting New Yorkers first. He's not saying he's going to do his pilgrimage to Israel and stand in front of the Wailing Wall. And so we all were like, brilliant. We want him to win. And then what happened was, as time went on, I kind of didn't stop liking him. And the reason I stopped liking him is because I saw some of his funding is coming from certain left-wing Zionists. And also the fact that he was kind of retracting on some of his positions. His positions about Israel. And
I think they all do that.
Yeah.
I think they all do that. Donald Trump as well. He's going to release the Epstein files. He was going to release things about JFK. And these are minor. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
But, well, it might not be minor for his donors.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? Yeah. But I just feel as if they're all full of shit.
Yeah.
All these people in power, to get to that level and to get in that door, you've got to be dancing to their tune.
Exactly.
No matter what they're saying, no matter, I'm going to be here for New York, or no matter if I'm going to Israel, or I'm pro-Palestine and I'm pro-Israel. I just think they're all getting taught what to say.
Yeah.
Because it's all that hate. Oh, I like him, I hate her, I hate him, I like him. I just think it's all madness.
Yeah. So then what happened? I agree with you, by the way. And then what happened was I then changed my position again, and I did support him. And the reason was this, because what we found was in the mayor election, people like Bill Ackman, people like the Zionist lobby, Jewish Zionists, and the right-wing ones, and actually various others were pushing hard for him not to be elected. And someone like Bill Ackman, who is a Jewish Zionist millionaire, maybe billionaire, who was a Democrat, who shifted his position to the right after October the 7th, who has, or in my view, with him, Silicon Valley, big tech, with the billionaires, got Trump elected. He also got many students expelled from universities in the United States of America. He got deans of universities fired. He was choosing elections. He made the Hampton visit with Charlie Kirk, where Candace Owens claims that he was pressured, but he definitely did have that event where he was training Zionist influencers in order to propagate their positions. The way I saw it is these people had ultimate power, and they believed that they could choose the president, they could choose the deans, they wielded unbridled power. And so I wanted them to lose so that people had hope, that people realize that actually, if you're not a Zionist, you can actually win elections. You don't need to be controlled by them. The people will choose you over them. And what you saw with the elections was Mamdani won the Democrat primary, and then he ran for the main election. You had Mamdani as the Democrat nominee. You had Curtis Silver as the Republican nominee. And then Cuomo was then saying, the guy who lost the Democrat primary said, I'm going to run as an independent. And also Eric Adams said, I'm going to run as an independent. They then have a conversation with Eric Adams and tell him to drop out. He agrees and he drops out because they want Cuomo to win. Cuomo then goes, and then they realize that Mamdani is still going to win. The Republican president, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, who's now meant to be a Republican, who should they be supporting? They should be supporting the Republican candidate, Curtis Silver. They endorsed the Democrat. They endorsed Cuomo. Cuomo, who destroyed New York. Cuomo, who is involved in the death and murder of basically pensioners and people who were in nursing homes in the United States of America, who did horrible during COVID, who has many of these sex allegations against them. They supported him over the Republican candidate. And so that demonstrated that party politics is fake. It's really about who's their guy and who's not their guy. And they wanted Mamdani to lose. And so when Mamdani won, which is what we wanted, because we wanted all of those people to lose, it became a good thing in terms of now if you look at US politics, you know, the amount of people who came out and said we're going to run as an anti-Zionist candidate is unbelievable. So I think the benefit in that regard outweighed the wins. Now, in terms of New York, the reason Mamdani won is affordability. He literally said, and this is the reason why there's a lot of Trump voters who voted for Mamdani, because Trump also spoke for the working class. You know, like a lot of working class now who are basically voting for reform, because they think like these guys are speaking for us, which I don't believe they are. I believe all of them are speaking for those in power. But Trump, they believe Trump was. Mamdani was saying the same thing, affordability. We're going to bring rent prices down. We're going to freeze rent prices. We're going to bring childcare in. We're going to, make it easy for groceries. People understood that message. And because in the US, people struggle really badly. You know, like here, it's hard for Americans to understand how, although I love the United States of America, but the poverty levels are really bad in the US, worse than here. You know, like how here you'll see a beggar on the streets and you'll think, oh, it's really bad that there's a beggar. You go to the US and you see a homeless person and you think, wow, their level of homelessness is not just more, but even the homeless people are really struggling. Like they'll have deformities, they'll be like on drugs, they'll be shivering on the streets. It's really bad. An average American can't afford to pay for rent and groceries. I basically, if I'm traveling in Uber and I'll talk to working class people in the US and obviously wealthy people, and I speak to working class people and hardly any of them have one job. Most of them have got 2 or 3 jobs. It's very hard to be a working class American. So Mamdani spoke to those people just like Trump spoke to those people. And I think that's where the shift is. The problem is that in the US, you don't have working class people to speak for them. In the UK, we have the same problem. There is nobody speaking for the working class. Either you're like on the left and you have to be a woke liberal, and Mamdani is a woke liberal, but that wasn't the aspect. It was the fact that he was speaking for the working class. Or you have to be on the right and you have to speak out against minorities or Muslims, or really Muslims. They don't even care about minorities. And so that's really what it is. No one speaks to the working class, whereas in the US or the UK, there's no political party whatsoever. And that's how they're able to create a division. And that's really why Mamdani won.
What makes the world a better place then? Because there is a lot of chaos, but there is a lot of beauty. But you don't think people can be divided like you think religions can live together. You think things can be better. But what do you think makes it a better place?
I think what makes it a better place is people speak to each other. People discuss ideas. People understand where other people are coming from, rather than people. I know I use the word far right, but I don't like using that word, but I don't know what's the best word to describe it. But giving people labels, he's a far right, he's a Muslim, he's this, he's that. I think that's what causes harm. In reality, what people need to do is have conversations, speak about how we can make the world a better place, how we can make the UK a better place, how we can make the US. Let's be clear on this. You're not going to make the UK a better place by having riots in working class areas and destroying working class areas. You make the UK a better place by standing up for the working class. And let me tell you, Labour aren't doing it, Conservatives aren't doing it, Reform aren't doing it. I don't think your party are going to do it, because again, your party, when they came out, they were like, oh, we're going to speak for like wokeness and liberalism and all these kind of things. We don't have anybody speaking for them. If you speak out for the working class, the poor people, I think that's the way you're going to have a better place. People of all religions speaking. This is why I mentioned to you, like, I don't debate Christians and I don't debate people of other sects. I debate Zionists. Look, I am a debater. I do debate people. That's how I became big. But that being said, only on those issues, because I think that issue actually harms society. But anything else, I think there needs to be conversations, there needs to be ideas. People on the far right are afraid to speak to me because they know that I speak rationally. They know that I can dispel a lot of their positions. And that's why I think is intentionally done. And this is why I know you're not on the far right now, I've met you, but I initially thought you were, right? But I give you a lot of credit because you are speaking to people, you are having these conversations, you are willing to have these ideas, and then we're able to break it down. And I do think that people on the far right in the UK, because in the US, they're willing to do so. I go to the US and I get platformed by far right people all the time. But in the UK, they're afraid. And the reason they're afraid is because I know they know their ideas aren't that strong.
Yeah, I will interview anyone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people reject coming on this podcast as well because of who I'm connected with. But I've interviewed Andrew Tate, Tommy Robinson, Katie Hopkins, David Dykes. I was interviewing these people through their cancellation. Wow. Now it's trendy to interview people who's kind of cancelled. I was taking the heat then because I understand we're all different. I could have different views and beliefs tomorrow, next week, next month, and that's okay. It's just the way we see the world. It's to have that conversation. That's why these conversations are important. The majority of stuff you say I agree with. There's a majority of facts that you're saying. I'm not the most educated. I'm not the most my vocabulary's not great,
Yeah.
but I understand humans.
Exactly.
I understand we're all being programmed. I understand that we can all give a little more, which is the most important thing. I think we all have the key elements of life. We all know right from wrong. I just think we can make bad decisions, certain, because we're gravitating towards what we're seeing online and the media. But all in all, humans are good. The majority of humans just want to go on with their life. The stuff you see online is a very extreme on all aspects of life, you know. So I just say to people watching or listening, question you, question me, and just have your own assumption. But look at all angles, you know. Don't just follow something and not really know all the facts and figures, because that's why it's important for these conversations, you know. But like I say, I respect what you do, coming on here today and telling things from your side. How can people message you or watch your stuff? What's your social media links?
Yeah, appreciate it. So I'm on X. It's Sheikh Sulaiman X. I'm really big on X. And also I stream on party.com.
What's that?
It's basically...
Sounds like some fucking swinging website. You're not on there shagging hookers, are you? Doing some sort of OnlyFans? What site's that?
Listen. It's not OnlyFans. It's not controlled by Zionists.
Party.com. What's that, bro?
So it's basically an alternative to Kick and Twitch. So it has myself on there, Myron Gaines is on there, Sneeko.
I know Myron. I spoke to Myron yesterday.
Yeah.
He's coming over to the UK.
Definitely, we should have him on.
Yeah, he's been on before. I had him when they were doing Fresh and Fit.
Yeah.
Years ago. But we were all kind of linked at that time when we done the Andrew Tate thing.
Yeah.
You know. But what else? What is Party?
Yeah, Party. So Party.com, I stream on there Monday to Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, midnight UK, and then you can watch it back. But that my show is a political show. So what I do is, like, you know, what I'm speaking to you about is what I speak about daily basis, whatever the news is, US politics, UK politics, Middle Eastern politics. And then I'm on YouTube, where I'll put clips of my show onto YouTube, and that's also Sheikh Sulaiman X.
Good on you, my brother. Listen, for coming on today.
Thank you so much.
I thoroughly enjoyed that. But we'll do like some sort of round table as well.
Yeah.
Just all different opinions, and
that would be awesome. You know, someone from the far right, maybe someone from the far left, someone from...
Brother, it's just trying to get people together.
Yeah.
So people are caught up in their own ways that they just don't want to listen to other people's, and that goes left and right. I've tried to interview so many from the left and they would reject, and I think...
But do you think with the left, I understand they get triggered very easily. Like, I got thrown out of university because they thought I was too far right, right? But in terms of, like, with the people, I feel like I'm mentioning Tommy Robinson up, but he's like the leader of the movement, hence why we mentioned him.
Yeah, he's a massive name with a massive following.
He's the leader of the kind of current movement, right? So someone like him, why do you think he's like afraid to have a conversation with someone like me or a debate, or even, for example, someone like Steve Laws, right? Someone I disagree with a lot. But one thing I would say about him is his position is a lot more honest compared to Tommy Robinson's, because Tommy Robinson makes it look like he's for immigration, but he's not. He makes it look like he's for the working class, he's not. Now, I disagree with Steve Law's positions, but at least it's consistent. But I feel like Tommy Robinson not, and I think that's why Tommy Robinson runs from debates, either from myself or from him or from various other people. And I think that even if it's not Tommy, but people who have the same position as him should be willing to have these conversations, because then we can see how strong their arguments are. And I think that's really important.
I'll ask them the question.
Yeah.
What, do you want to have a debate? If not, why not?
Yeah.
You know?
He agreed to it, because I've got similar friends as Tommy as well.
Yeah.
Like Myron, we agreed to a debate. Myron was going to moderate. He said to me, he literally said this to me. He said, he agreed to the debate. And then he said, and I said, look, I'll debate you anytime, anywhere. And then he said, look, I can't do it. I don't want to do it online. I said, no problem. He said, I can't do it in the US. I said, no problem. He said, you need to come to, like, you know, is there some place in Spain he was? And I said, no problem. So I agreed to all of his conditions. Now, to be fair to him, like a month, then he said he wants to spend time with his, you know, his family. And I said, no problem whatsoever. And now, to be fair to him, immediately after that, he got arrested. But now is the time. He needs to...
Listen, I'll reach out to him, man. I don't think he'll shy away from it.
I think he does.
He's got such a hectic life, if I'm honest. You know, like, he's got so much pressures and court cases and family and trying to stay alive.
Yeah.
Like, as much as he's got a mass following, people still want him dead as well. But I can ask him the question, like... And I think you'd be surprised. I think you would be shocked. I think you'd probably have a lot more in common than you actually think. You know, it's good to have disagreements, but having beliefs on something, for me, shows courage no matter who you are. But for me, I just want to sit. I'll sit with anyone, which is important. But again, my brother, would you like to finish up on anything else?
No, I just want to thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's been an honor and a privilege to be on your show.
Likewise, mate. I look forward to seeing what you do for the future. God bless, bro, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you very much.